Connor Smith was a 21-year-old college student living in Sarasota, Florida, a city known for its population of rich cougars, snowbirds, and the dark underbelly of young people who serve them in every way. He was passionate about cooking and dreamed of becoming a top chef. His friends often called him a foodie, and he loved to experiment with different recipes. Connor was a student at Sarasota State College of Florida, where he studied culinary arts. He had a part-time job as a food critic intern at the local newspaper, the Sarasota Herald-Tribune. His reviews were already gaining attention for their snappy, biting style, often bashing Central Florida's love of chain restaurants. Connor was well-liked by his peers. He was known for his friendly personality and his ability to make everyone around him feel comfortable. He had a natural charisma that made him popular not just with his friends, but also with older women. He often attended Sarasota's high-end social events with them in exchange for sex. Connor was confident and adventurous, always looking for new lovers and experiences in life, love, and in the kitchen. In the days before his death, Connor was busy working on a new restaurant review. He was excited about the opportunity to visit one of Sarasota's most exclusive restaurants, Ophelia's on the Bay, a spot famous for its seafood and waterfront views. Connor's excitement was evident in his conversations with friends and colleagues. He was eager to make a name for himself in the world of food journalism and hoped this review would help him stand out. Connor's dreams were big. He wanted to travel the world, tasting different cuisines and learning from the best chefs. He often talked about moving to New York City one day to work in the Michelin-starred restaurant. But those dreams were cut short by a deadly plan that no one saw coming. On the morning of January 15, 2015, Sarasota was just starting to wake up to a clear, crisp day. Around 8 o'clock a.m., Connor Smith's roommate, Jordan Kim, noticed something was off. Connor hadn't left for his early morning shift at the Sarasota Herald-Tribune, which was unusual. Connor was always up before dawn, eager to get a head start on his day. Jordan knocked on Connor's bedroom door, but there was no response. Concerned, he decided to open the door. What he found inside was something that would haunt him forever. Connor was lying on his bed, motionless, with a pale complexion and no signs of life. The room, usually filled with the smell of whatever dish Connor had been perfecting, was now eerily quiet, smelling disturbingly of urine and feces. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken furniture, and no overturned belongings. It was as if Connor had simply gone to sleep and never woken up. Jordan's first reaction was shock. He stood frozen in the doorway, unable to process what he was seeing. Then panic set in. He rushed to his phone and dialed 911. His hands trembling as he tried to explain the situation to the dispatcher. His voice cracked with fear and confusion as he described how he had found his best friend unresponsive in bed. When the paramedics arrived, they quickly confirmed what Jordan already feared: Connor was dead. The police arrived shortly after, their flashing lights reflecting off the walls of the small apartment. The scene was surreal, the calm of the morning shattered by the reality of death. Jordan was in a state of shock. He couldn't believe what had just happened. The officers on the scene had to coax him out of the apartment so they could begin their investigation. He was later taken to the police station for questioning, where he was still visibly shaken, struggling to comprehend the loss of his friend. Connor's body was taken to the Sarasota County Medical Examiner's office for an autopsy as the investigation into his mysterious death began. No one knew yet that this was just the beginning of a dark and twisted story. The Sarasota Police Department arrived at Connor Smith's apartment within minutes of receiving the 911 call on January 15, 2015. Leading the investigation was Detective Linda Perez-Sanchez, a seasoned officer known for her meticulous attention to detail. Perez-Sanchez had seen her share of crime scenes, but something about this one felt different. The quiet apartment, the untouched belongings, and the peaceful appearance of Connor's body all seemed to hint at a death that was anything but natural. As the officers entered Connor's bedroom, they immediately noticed the lack of any obvious signs of foul play. There was no blood, no weapons, and no indication of a struggle. Connor lay on his bed as if he had just drifted off to sleep. But as Detective Perez-Sanchez took a closer look, she began to suspect that something more sinister had occurred. Connor's pale skin and the faint, bluish tinge around his lips pointed to a possible poisoning. The crime scene was methodically photographed and documented. Every detail, from the neatly made bed to the half-empty glass of water on the nightstand, was carefully recorded. The police combed through the room, searching for any clues that might explain how a healthy, 21-year-old man could suddenly die. They dusted for fingerprints, collected samples from the water glass, and bagged several items from the kitchen. including a tray of leftover cannelloni that Connor had brought home from dinner the night before. The medical examiner, Dr. Karen Ong, arrived at the scene shortly after. She performed a preliminary examination and confirmed Detective Perez Sanchez's suspicions. Connor's death appeared to be the result of poisoning. Dr. Ong ordered a full toxicology report to determine exactly what substance had caused Connor's untimely death. As the investigation continued, the police expanded their search to the entire apartment. They questioned Jordan Kim, Connor's roommate, who was still in shock but cooperated fully with the investigators. Jordan described Connor's recent activities, including his job at the Sarasota Herald-Tribune and his passion for cooking. He mentioned that Connor had been in good spirits the night before, excited about a new restaurant review he was working on. Detective Perez Sanchez knew that time was of the essence. If Connor had been poisoned, the person responsible might still be nearby, and the toxicology report would be crucial in identifying the exact cause of death. Bella Summers, 67, was the first person the police questioned in their investigation into Connor Smith's death. Bella was a well-known figure in Sarasota's social scene. She was glamorous, confident, and fiercely proud of her youthful appearance. As so-called cougar, Bella had a reputation for sexual relationships with much younger men, and Connor was one of them. Despite her age, Bella held on to her allure, using her charm to stay at the center of Sarasota's wealthy and older elite. Bella's past was as colorful as her present. She often reminisced about her days at Disney World, where she was one of the first girls to work there when it opened in 1971. Dressed as Cinderella, Bella entertained the park's first guests, a story she loved to share at social gatherings. Her tales of Disney magic kept her in the spotlight, but those who knew her well understood that these stories also masked a deep insecurity. Those days were long behind her, and Bella had spent thousands on cosmetic procedures and beauty treatments, all in an effort to keep age at bay. When police brought Bella in for questioning, she maintained her composure, calmly denying any involvement in Connor's death. She insisted that their relationship was a fun and mutually beneficial arrangement, and claimed to have had no reason to harm him. Bella described their last interaction, a dinner at her home just days before Connor's death, where she served her famous Nana's cannelloni, a dish she often used to reward her younger lovers for their sexual performance. Bella was cooperative, answering the detectives' questions with ease and even offering to provide them with the recipe as if it were a harmless detail. But beneath her polished exterior, Detective Linda Perez Sanchez sensed something off. Bella's calm demeanor and willingness to share details seemed almost too perfect, as if she were playing a role she knew well. The detectives noted her behavior and the possible motive. Bella's obsessive need to control and retain her youth, even at the expense of those around her. The question lingered. How far would Bella go to keep her youth and her lovers close? Bella's obsession with retaining her youth and the way she spoke about Connor suggested a deeper, more complex relationship than she initially let on. The detectives couldn't ignore the possibility that Bella's insecurities and fears of losing control over her young lover might have driven her to do something drastic. As the investigation continued, Bella remained under close scrutiny, her carefully crafted image beginning to show cracks. The second suspect the police investigated was Ryan Blake Ross, a 22-year-old fitness trainer who worked at an exclusive gym frequented by Sarasota's elite. Ryan was well known for his good looks, charm, and his side gigs as both a drug dealer and gigolo. He was one of Bella Summers' many younger lovers, but his relationship with her had become increasingly complicated over time. Ryan had a reputation for being outgoing and friendly, but those close to him knew that he had a competitive streak and a tendency towards sexual jealousy. Ryan's connection to Connor Smith was tense. Both young men were sexual partners of Bella, and it was no secret that Ryan saw Connor as a rival. Connor's status as a college student and a gourmand with growing popularity among Sarasota's social circles only fueled Ryan's insecurities as a nearly illiterate college dropout. Ryan had sent Connor several threatening messages in the weeks leading up to Connor's death, warning him to stay away from Bella or else. These messages immediately caught the attention of the investigators. When the police brought Ryan in for questioning, he tried to maintain his usual confident demeanor, but it was clear he was on edge. Ryan, looking haggard compared to his buff social media pictures, denied having anything to do with Connor's death, claiming that his threats were just harmless stuff. He insisted that he had no real issues with Connor, and that their rivalry was more playful than serious. However, Detective Perez Sanchez noticed Ryan's agitation, particularly when asked about his whereabouts on the night of Connor's death. Ryan described his relationship with Bella as sexually intense, but stressed that he wasn't the only young people in her life. He spoke about Bella's many other lovers, including Chloe Hart, who was also one of his customers as a drug dealer, and how he sometimes felt overshadowed by them, especially after Bella sent them a spreadsheet ranking their sexual performance, which showed Connor and Chloe competing for first place and Ryan in fifth place. Ryan's jealousy and anger was evident, and the police began to see him as someone who might have acted out of fear of losing his position in Bella's life. The investigators pressed Ryan on his relationship with Connor, trying to get him to admit to a deeper motive, but Ryan stuck to his story, insisting he had nothing to do with the murder. Despite Ryan's denials, the police couldn't ignore the threats he had made. His jealousy and anger toward Connor, combined with his relationship with Bella, made him a strong suspect. As the investigation continued, the detectives kept a close eye on Ryan, trying to uncover more about his connection to the crime. The third suspect in the investigation was Chloe Hart, a 19-year-old with a complex and troubled past. Chloe had moved to Sarasota from Michigan to escape a life of drug addiction and quickly became involved in the city's flourishing adult film industry, working under the stage name Kara Bratwurst Lover. Despite her youth, Chloe was known for her seductive charm and her ability to manipulate situations to her advantage. She had become one of Bella Summer's many young lovers, viewing the older woman as a path to financial stability and a chance to distance herself from her drug habit and her work in the adult entertainment industry. Chloe's relationship with Bella was transactional in nature. Bella provided Chloe with gifts and financial support, while Chloe offered sex. However, Chloe was not content with just being one of many. She wanted to secure her place as Bella's one and only. This desire to stand out and reach first place in Bella's weekly spreadsheet made her fiercely competitive with Bella's other lovers, including Connor Smith and Ryan Blake Ross. When the police brought Chloe in for questioning, she appeared calm and cooperative, but her answers were carefully measured. Chloe claimed that her sexual relationship with Bella was purely for survival and that she had no reason to harm Connor. She admitted to knowing about the tension between Ryan and Connor, but denied having any involvement in their rivalry. Chloe painted herself as a victim of circumstance, trying to escape her past and build a better life in Sarasota. Detective Kara Sanchez, however, was not entirely convinced by Chloe's story. He noted that Chloe's responses were often vague, especially when asked about her interactions with Connor and Ryan in the days leading up to Connor's death. Chloe was quick to deflect questions about her own feelings toward Bella, focusing instead on how difficult her life had been before moving to Sarasota. Chloe's history of drug use and her involvement in the adult film industry made her a complicated figure in the investigation. The detectives were aware that Chloe had recently been diagnosed with HIV/AIDS, something she attributed to her drug habit. This information, combined with her relationship with Bella, added another layer of complexity to the case. While Chloe insisted that she had nothing to do with Connor's death, the investigators remained suspicious. Her motives, combined with her willingness to manipulate situations to her advantage, made her a person of interest. The detectives continued to dig deeper into Chloe's past and her connection to Bella, trying to determine if she played a role in the murder. The investigation took a shocking turn on January 28, 2015, when new evidence emerged that would reshape the entire case. It was a cool, crisp morning in Sarasota, with the sun just beginning to rise over the Gulf of Mexico. Detective Kara Sanchez and his team were combing through Bella Summer's lavish home, hoping to uncover anything that might link her or the other suspects to Connor Smith's death. What they found was far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. In Bella's bedroom, hidden in the back of a locked drawer, detectives discovered a stack of medical records and personal journals. The records revealed that Bella had been living with HIV/AIDS for several years. But even more shocking were the entries in her journals, where Bella wrote how she had been deliberately giving her many young lovers the disease by making them have sex with her without protection. She described her twisted belief that by infecting them with HIV/AIDS, she could rob them of their youth, a twisted notion born from her deep insecurities about aging and envy towards those who were still young. Bella believed that by passing on the virus, she was somehow avenging her lost youth and punishing those she envied for their vitality and attractiveness. This revelation stunned the detectives. It provided a chilling new motive for Bella to murder Connor. If Connor had discovered Bella's plan and threatened to expose her, it would have given Bella a powerful reason to silence him permanently. The detectives immediately re-examined the timeline of events leading up to Connor's death, paying special attention to his interactions with Bella in the days before he was poisoned. The discovery of Bella's journals also shed new light on the other suspects. Ryan Blake Ross and Chloe Hart had both been romantically involved with Bella and must have been victims of her twisted scheme. The detectives considered the possibility that either Ryan or Chloe might have learned about Bella's plan and sought revenge, or that Bella, fearing exposure, had decided to eliminate anyone who might pose a threat to her. Armed with this new evidence, the investigators intensified their focus on Bella Summers. They began building a case that linked her not only to Connor's murder, but also to a broader pattern of deceit and manipulation. The medical records and journals were sent for further analysis, and the detectives prepared to confront Bella with the horrifying truth they had uncovered. As the investigation continued, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, bringing the detectives closer to solving the case and revealing the dark secrets that had led to Connor Smith's tragic death. On January 30, 2015, just 2 days after uncovering the damning evidence in Bella Summers' home, the Sarasota police made their move. The team, led by Detective Caray Sanchez, arrived at Bella's residence in the early afternoon. The sky was clear, and the winter sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns of her upscale neighborhood. Bella was at home, preparing for one of her famous dinner parties, when the detectives knocked on her door. Bella, dressed in an elegant robe and with her hair perfectly styled, answered the door with her usual confident smile. But that smile quickly faded when Detective Caray Sanchez informed her that she was under arrest for the murder of Connor Smith. Bella's reaction was a mix of shock and defiance. She demanded to know what evidence they had against her, maintaining her innocence even as she was handcuffed and led away. As she was escorted to the police car, Bella began loudly reciting the slogan from the soap opera Days of Our Lives. Like sands through the horror blast, so are the days of our lives, in what seemed to be an attempt to feign insanity. The arrest of Bella Summers sent shockwaves through Sarasota's social circles. Known for her glamorous lifestyle and youthful companions, Bella's involvement in such a shocking and heinous crime was almost impossible for many to believe. But as the details of the case began to emerge, it became clear that the charming exterior Bella had cultivated hid a much darker reality. Detective Caray Sanchez and the team had built a strong case against Bella. The medical records and journals they found in her home provided clear evidence of her twisted plan to infect her young lovers with HIV/AIDS. They also uncovered a series of text messages between Bella and Connor in which he confronted her about her actions. It was clear from these messages that Connor had threatened to expose Bella, leading her to take drastic measures to protect her secret. As Bella sat in the interrogation room, she remained composed, denying any involvement in Connor's death. But the evidence was overwhelming, and her attempts to cast doubt on the investigation were in vain. Connor's family, devastated by the loss, expressed relief that justice was finally being served. They described Connor as a bright young man with a promising future and couldn't comprehend how someone like Bella could be responsible for his death. Bella's arrest marked a turning point in the investigation. The once confident socialite now faced the reality of her actions, and the Sarasota community watched in disbelief as the case unfolded in the media. Bella Summers' trial began in late March 2015. The prosecution was led by Assistant State Attorney Michael Dunbar, a seasoned 48-year-old with a reputation for being relentless in the courtroom. Dunbar was determined to secure a conviction, painting Bella as a manipulative woman who used her charm to lure in young men and then poisoned them to maintain her twisted sense of youth. Dunbar presented the jury with the evidence found in Bella's home, the medical records, journals, and text messages that clearly showed her malicious intent. He argued that Bella, fearing Connor Smith would expose her secret, decided to kill him by lacing his favorite dish, Nana's cannelloni, with rat poison. The slow, agonizing death Connor suffered was a testament to Bella's cruelty, Dunbar emphasized. Bella's defense attorney, Sharon McAllister, a 39-year-old with a calm demeanor and a sharp legal mind, argued that Bella was being unfairly targeted due to her age and unconventional relationships. McAllister tried to portray Bella as a victim of societal expectations and a woman who had made poor choices but was not a murderer. She claimed that the evidence was circumstantial and that the prosecution had failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Bella had poisoned Connor. McAllister also suggested that Connor's death could have been an accident or the result of someone else's actions, casting suspicion on Bella's other lovers, Ryan Blake Ross and Chloe Hart. Throughout the trial, Connor's family watched with heavy hearts. His mother, Susan Smith, often fought back tears as she listened to the graphic details of her son's death. The emotional toll on the family was evident, and they sought justice for the bright young man who had been taken from them too soon. After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for just 6 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts. Bella Summers was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge's sentence was seen as a victory for the prosecution and a small measure of justice for Connor's grieving family. The verdict brought some closure to the Smith family, but the pain of losing Connor would never fully heal. For Bella Summers, the once glamorous socialite, the rest of her life would be spent behind bars, far from the luxury and youth she so desperately tried to hold on to. After the trial, the lives of those involved in the case changed dramatically. Bella Summers, once a glamorous figure in Sarasota's high society, began serving her life sentence in Florida's Lowell Correctional Institution. The prison's stark environment was a far cry from the luxury Bella had once known. Stripped of her wealth and status, she quickly became just another inmate, her obsession with youth now a distant memory as she faced the reality of growing old behind bars. Ram Blake Ross, who had been under suspicion during the investigation, distanced himself from Sarasota's social scene after the trial. The attention he had once enjoyed from older women now brought him unwanted notoriety. Ryan eventually left Florida, moving to California, where he tried to start fresh as a personal trainer in Los Angeles. However, the stigma of his association with Bella Summers and the murder case followed him, making it difficult for him to truly escape his past. Chloe Hart, who had also been a suspect, faced her own challenges. With her reputation tarnished by the trial, she could no longer find work in Sarasota's adult film industry. Flo decided to leave the industry altogether, focusing on overcoming her drug addiction and trying to live a more stable life. She moved back to her hometown in Michigan, where she sought support from her family and local rehabilitation programs. In the years following the trial, Sarasota moved on, but the memory of the shocking crime lingered. It served as a cautionary tale about the dark side of obsession and the lengths to which some would go to cling to their youth. Maria Rodarty Sullivan was a vibrant 38-year-old woman known for her artistic talents and kind-hearted nature. She lived in Summerville, South Carolina, a small town known for its charming downtown and the annual Flower Town Festival. Maria worked as a freelance artist, creating beautiful paintings and sculptures that she sold at local art fairs and galleries. Maria lived with her husband, David Sullivan, and her 18-year-old stepson, Tyler. David was a retired naval officer, and they had been married for 10 years. Despite their 20-year age difference, Maria and David were deeply in love. They met at a local art show where Maria's work was being displayed. David was immediately drawn to her creativity and passion for life. Maria tried her best to create a happy and harmonious home. She balanced her freelance work with managing the household and caring for Tyler. She was a motherly figure to Tyler, who had lost his biological mother a few years earlier. Maria and Tyler's relationship was said to be strained, but she remained hopeful that they could eventually bond. In her free time, Maria enjoyed reading and gardening. She was a big fan of classic literature, often quoting Jane Austen and the Bronte sisters. Her garden was filled with vibrant flowers, a testament to her love for nature. Maria was also active in the local community, volunteering at the Somerville Public Library and participating in neighborhood events. In the days leading up to her death, Maria was excited about a new art project. She was working on a series of sculptures inspired by the local wildlife and landscapes of South Carolina. Maria planned to showcase these pieces at the upcoming Flower Town Festival. She was also looking forward to a small family getaway she had planned, hoping it would help mend the strained relationship between her and Tyler. Maria's friends described her as charismatic and friendly. She had a close-knit social circle and was always willing to lend a helping hand. Her friends recalled how Maria would often host dinner parties, cooking delicious meals, and creating a warm, welcoming atmosphere. Despite the challenges in her life, Maria remained optimistic and full of dreams. She hoped to open her own art gallery someday and inspire others with her work. Tragically, her dreams were cut short by a brutal and senseless act of violence. Maria's life was a testament to her resilience and creativity, and her loss was deeply felt by all who knew her. On the morning of September 12, 2012, Somerville was just waking up. It was a cool, clear day, with the sun shining brightly. Around 8:30 a.m., Maria Rodarty Sullivan's neighbor, Lilybeth Carter, walked over to the Sullivan house. Lilibeth, who was 25 years old, lived next door. She often visited Maria to discuss her true crime novel, which she was working on based on real-life events. Lilibeth knocked on the door, but no one answered. She found this odd because Maria was usually up early, working in her art studio. The studio was a small separate building in the backyard. Lilibeth decided to check there. As she approached the studio, she noticed the door was slightly open. When Lilibeth entered, she was greeted by a horrific scene. Maria was lying on the floor, covered in blood. The room was in chaos, with broken sculptures and shattered glass everywhere. Maria's body showed signs of a violent struggle. Lilibeth was shocked and horrified. Her hands trembled as she quickly dialed 911 on her cell phone. The 911 operator, calming Lilibeth as best they could, instructed her to stay outside and wait for the police. Lilibeth, still in shock, followed the instructions. She stood in the yard, staring at the studio, trying to process what she had just seen. The police arrived within minutes. As they began their investigation, they noted the heavy sculpture near Maria's body. It was clear this was the murder weapon, used to inflict multiple blunt force trauma injuries. The amount of blood and the state of the studio indicated a frenzied attack. Lilibeth was interviewed by the police. She was still shaken but managed to provide a clear account of her morning. She described her relationship with Maria and her reasons for visiting. Her detailed observations helped the investigators piece together the timeline of events leading up to the discovery of Maria's body. The discovery of Maria Rodarty Sullivan's body marked the beginning of a complex and emotional investigation. Her friends and neighbors were left in shock, struggling to understand how such a brutal crime could happen in their peaceful community. When the police arrived at the Sullivan house on the morning of September 12, 2012, they knew they had a serious crime on their hands. It was a sunny day in Somerville, and the peaceful neighborhood was quickly disturbed by the flashing lights and sirens of police cars. Detective Martin Coco, a seasoned investigator known for his thoroughness, led the team. With him was Officer Julia Montes, who was respected for her calm and methodical approach. They had both seen many crime scenes, but the brutality of this one stood out. The art studio where Maria's body was found was a small building in the backyard. As they entered, the detectives were met with a gruesome sight. Blood was splattered on the walls, and the floor was covered with broken sculptures and shattered glass. The room looked like a scene from a horror movie, a far cry from the creative space it usually was. Maria's body lay on the floor, showing signs of a violent struggle. It was clear that she had been beaten to death with a heavy sculpture found nearby. The sculpture was stained with blood, indicating it was the murder weapon. Maria had multiple blunt force trauma injuries, suggesting a frenzied and brutal attack. The police immediately began their investigation. They cordoned off the area to preserve evidence. Detective Coco and Officer Montes carefully examined the crime scene, looking for any clues. They used advanced forensic techniques, including fingerprint dusting and blood pattern analysis, to piece together what had happened. The detectives worked quickly but meticulously. They collected samples of blood and hair for DNA analysis and took photographs of the scene from every angle. They also found a few items that seemed out of place, like a torn piece of cloth and a broken piece of jewelry, which they bagged as evidence. Outside, neighbors gathered, watching with a mix of fear and curiosity. The police asked anyone who had seen or heard anything unusual to come forward. They also conducted door-to-door interviews to gather more information about the hours leading up to the discovery of Maria's body. As the day went on, the police presence grew. Additional officers arrived to help with the investigation, and the media started to gather, drawn by the shocking nature of the crime. News reporters from local stations like WCIV and the Post and Courier began reporting live from the scene, adding to the growing sense of urgency. By the end of the day, the police had gathered a substantial amount of evidence, but many questions remained. Who could have done this, and why? Detective Coco and Officer Montes knew they had a long road ahead, but they were determined to find justice for Maria. David Sullivan, Maria's husband, was the first suspect the police investigated. David, who was 58 years old, had a disciplined and stoic personality, shaped by his years of service in the Navy. He married Maria 10 years ago, providing her with stability and support. Despite his stern exterior, David was deeply in love with Maria and very protective of his family. On September 12, 2012, after the police discovered Maria's body, they brought David in for questioning. Detective Martin Coco and Officer Julia Montes conducted the interview. David appeared calm, but was clearly shaken by the news of his wife's death. He told the detectives that he had been away on a business trip, staying at a Hampton Inn in Boston. He provided hotel receipts and a confirmation of his check-in and check-out times to back up his alibi. David's interview lasted several hours. The detectives asked him about his relationship with Maria and any possible enemies she might have had. David spoke about the tensions between Maria and his son Tyler. He mentioned that Tyler had been acting out since the death of his biological mother and struggled to accept Maria as a mother figure. David believed that despite these challenges, the family would eventually reconcile. The police also searched the Sullivan home for additional evidence. They went through David's belongings and searched his car, but found nothing suspicious. They interviewed David's colleagues and checked his phone records, all of which confirmed his alibi. Throughout the investigation, David maintained his composure. However, the strain was visible. He expressed his grief and disbelief that someone could harm Maria. He was cooperative with the police and provided them with any information they requested. Meanwhile, the local news outlets, such as WCIV and the Post and Courier, reported on the investigation. Neighbors and friends of the Sullivans were shocked to hear that David was a suspect. Many described him as a kind and loving husband who would never harm his wife. Despite his strong alibi, the police continued to investigate David to ensure nothing was overlooked. They re-examined the crime scene and cross-checked all the details of his alibi. Detective Coco and Officer Montes wanted to be thorough, leaving no stone unturned. As days passed, it became clear that David was not involved in Maria's murder. The focus of the investigation shifted to other potential suspects. While David was cleared, the pain of losing Maria and being under suspicion was a heavy burden he had to bear. On September 15, 2012, just 3 days after the discovery of Maria's body, Somerville was covered in a light drizzle. The gray skies matched the somber mood in the town. Around noon, while reviewing the evidence collected from the crime scene, Detective Martin Coco noticed something unusual. Hidden among Maria's art supplies in her studio were dozens of letters. These were not just any letters, but sexually explicit love letters exchanged between Maria and someone else. Detective Coco and Officer Julia Montes carefully read through the letters. The content revealed a secret affair between Maria and an unidentified individual. The letters spoke graphically of secret sex acts and deep, conflicting emotions. This discovery was a significant breakthrough in the case and suggested a possible motive for the murder. Detective Coco called for a meeting with the entire investigative team. They discussed the contents of the letters and the implications, but he knew they had to identify the other person involved in the affair to understand the full context and potential motives. Officer Montes led the effort to gather more information. She visited Maria's close friends and neighbors, asking if anyone knew about the affair. Many were shocked and had no idea Maria was involved with someone other than her husband, David. The news quickly spread through the small, very conservative Southern community, creating a buzz of gossip and speculation. Meanwhile, forensic experts analyzed the letters for fingerprints and DNA evidence. They also checked Maria's phone records and email history to find clues about her secret lover. The investigation was thorough, and every detail was scrutinized. On the same rainy afternoon, while examining Maria's phone, the detectives found a series of explicit text messages and call logs that led them to suspect Tyler, Maria's 18-year-old stepson. The messages hinted at a strained and complicated sexual relationship between Maria and Tyler. Some of the texts were heated, while others were more explicit and graphically described their sexual relationship. Detective Coco and Officer Montes were shocked by this new revelation. Tyler had always been seen as a troubled teenager, but the extent of his relationship with Maria was unexpected. The detectives knew they had to approach this delicately to get to the truth. The discovery of the love letters and text messages shifted the focus of the investigation. The police now had a clearer direction, and the pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together. They prepared to interrogate Tyler again, this time with new, compelling evidence that could unlock the secrets behind Maria's tragic death. Tyler Sullivan, Maria's 18-year-old stepson, became the focus of the investigation after the discovery of the love letters and text messages. Tyler was a troubled teenager, still struggling with the death of his biological mother and the arrival of Maria into his life. He often acted out, showing signs of resentment towards Maria for taking his mother's place. Despite this, he was intelligent and ambitious, with a passion for music. He spent hours playing his guitar, dreaming of becoming a famous musician. On September 16, 2012, Tyler was brought in for questioning.
Detective Martin Coco and Officer Julia Montes conducted the interview. Tyler appeared nervous but tried to remain calm. The detectives began by asking him about his relationship with Maria. Tyler admitted that their relationship was strained, but denied any involvement in her murder. When the detectives presented the love letters, Tyler's demeanor changed. He became visibly upset and defensive. He confessed to the affair, explaining that they started having sex about a year ago. Tyler said he became obsessed with Maria, believing that they could be together if his father David were out of the picture. However, Maria tried to end the affair and focus on her marriage, which frustrated Tyler. The detectives pressed Tyler for more details. They asked him about the night of Maria's murder. Tyler claimed he was at a friend's house, watching movies. The police checked his alibi, but it was weak and lacked concrete evidence. His friend Jake said Tyler was with him, but couldn't remember specific details or times. Tyler's reaction to the interrogation was a mix of anger and fear. He was defensive and argumentative, denying any involvement in the murder while expressing his frustration over Maria ending the affair. The detectives noted his conflicting emotions, which seemed to oscillate between sadness and anger.
While Tyler was a prime suspect, the police needed more evidence to link him directly to the crime. They continued to analyze the physical evidence from the crime scene and cross-referenced it with Tyler's statements. The detectives also reviewed security camera footage from the neighborhood, hoping to find any inconsistencies in Tyler's alibi. The investigation into Tyler was intense and thorough. Detective Thompson and Officer Montes were determined to uncover the truth. They knew Tyler had a motive, but they needed solid evidence to prove his involvement. The love letters and text messages were crucial, but they had to build a strong case. The investigation was far from over, and the detectives continued to piece together the puzzle. Tyler remained a key figure in the case, and the police were determined to find justice for Maria. Lilybeth Carter, the Sullivans' 25-year-old neighbor, became another person of interest in the investigation. Lilybeth lived next door and frequently visited the Sullivan house. She had a keen interest in true crime stories and was working on a novel based on real-life events. Lilybeth was known for her observant nature and was often seen taking notes and photos around the neighborhood. On September 17, 2012, the police brought Lilybeth in for questioning. Detective Martin Coco and Officer Julia Montes conducted the interview. Lilybeth appeared calm and cooperative. She explained that she had a passion for writing and was fascinated by true crime. She often visited Maria to discuss her novel and get feedback on her writing. The detectives asked Lilybeth about the morning she discovered Maria's body. Lilybeth recounted the events in detail, describing how she found the studio door slightly open and discovered Maria lying on the floor. She spoke about her shock and horror and how she immediately called 911. The detectives noted that Lilybeth's account was consistent with the initial report. As the questioning continued, the detectives probed deeper into Lilybeth's relationship with the Sullivans. Lilybeth admitted that she often observed the family dynamics, noting the tension between Maria and Tyler. She also mentioned that she had seen Tyler acting suspiciously on several occasions, but didn't think much of it at the time. The detectives asked Lilybeth about her interest in true crime and whether it influenced her actions. Lilybeth explained that her interest was purely academic and creative. She was writing a novel and used her observations to create realistic characters and scenarios. She denied any involvement in Maria's murder and insisted that she was just a concerned neighbor. Lilybeth's calm and cooperative demeanor made it difficult for the detectives to determine if she was hiding anything. They decided to search her house for any evidence that might link her to the crime. They found several notebooks filled with detailed observations about the neighborhood and the Sullivans, but nothing directly incriminating. Despite her cooperation, Lilybeth remained a person of interest. The detectives continued to monitor her closely, looking for any inconsistencies in her story. They also reviewed the security footage from the neighborhood, hoping to find any evidence that could either implicate or clear her. As the investigation into Lilybeth continued, the detectives faced the challenge of distinguishing between her genuine interest in true crime and any potential involvement in Maria's death. The complexity of the case deepened, but the police remained committed to finding the truth and bringing justice for Maria. On September 20, 2012, the investigation took a significant turn. Detective Martin Coco and Officer Julia Montes had gathered enough evidence to identify the murderer. The evidence pointed to Tyler Sullivan, Maria's 18-year-old stepson. Tyler's conflicting emotions and erratic behavior had raised suspicions from the start, but it was the discovery of his fingerprints on the murder weapon that sealed his fate. Tyler was known to be a troubled teenager. He struggled with the recent death of his biological mother and resented Maria for taking her place. Despite his intelligence and passion for music, Tyler's feelings for Maria had evolved into a dangerous mix of hatred and desire. When Maria confronted him about his failing grades and her decision to end their secret affair, Tyler snapped. In a fit of rage and obsession, he attacked her with a heavy sculpture from her studio. The detectives had pieced together the events of that fateful day. Tyler had been at the house, waiting for the right moment. When Maria entered the studio, he followed her. The confrontation escalated quickly, and in his fury, Tyler grabbed the sculpture and struck Maria multiple times, leading to her death. With the evidence in hand, the police prepared to arrest Tyler. On the evening of September 20, they arrived at the Sullivan home. Tyler was in his room, listening to music on his iPod. When the officers entered, Tyler seemed surprised but didn't resist arrest. He was handcuffed and taken to the police station for processing. David Sullivan, Tyler's father, was devastated by the news. He couldn't believe that his son was capable of such a brutal act. The family was torn apart by the revelation, and the community was equally shocked. Neighbors and friends who had known Tyler as a quiet, troubled teen now saw him in a completely different light. The police detailed the evidence during a press conference, explaining how Tyler's obsession with Maria and his inability to control his emotions led to the murder. The discovery of the sexually explicit letters and Tyler's fingerprints on the murder weapon were critical pieces of the puzzle that helped solve the case. As Tyler was taken away, his reaction was a mix of anger and resignation. He knew the evidence against him was overwhelming, and there was no escape from the consequences of his actions. Maria's friends and family were relieved that the murderer had been caught, but the pain of losing Maria remained. The arrest of Tyler Sullivan brought some closure to the case, but the journey to justice was far from over. The next step was the trial, where the full extent of Tyler's actions and motives would be revealed. The trial of Tyler Sullivan began on November 5, 2012, in Somerville, South Carolina. The courtroom was filled with reporters, friends, and family members, all eager to hear the details of the case. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney James Bliver, a seasoned lawyer known for his tenacity and thoroughness. He was 45 years old, with a stern demeanor that commanded respect. Bliver argued that Tyler's obsession with Maria, coupled with his anger over her ending their affair, led him to commit the brutal murder. He presented the love letters, text messages, and the forensic evidence linking Tyler to the crime. The prosecution's case was solid, painting a clear picture of Tyler's motive and actions. The defense was handled by public defender Sarah Jane Lemon, a compassionate and determined attorney who had been practicing law for over 20 years. She was 42 years old and known for her dedication to her clients. Lemon argued that Tyler was a troubled teenager who had been deeply affected by his mother's death and was struggling with mental health issues. She claimed that Tyler's actions were not premeditated but a result of emotional turmoil and confusion. Throughout the trial, the emotional toll on Maria's family was evident. Her husband, David Sullivan, sat in the front row, his face etched with grief and disbelief. Friends and family members wept quietly as they listened to the details of Maria's tragic death. After several weeks of testimony and evidence, the jury deliberated for 2 days. On December 3, 2012, they returned with a verdict. Tyler Sullivan was found guilty of second-degree murder. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the verdict. Tyler showed little emotion, his face blank as he listened to his fate. The sentencing took place on December 10, 2012. Tyler was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge stated that while Tyler's actions were driven by emotional distress, the brutality of the crime warranted a severe punishment. The sentence aimed to provide justice for Maria and her family while acknowledging Tyler's troubled background. Maria's family had mixed reactions to the sentence. Some felt it was too lenient, given the nature of the crime, while others believed it was a fair balance between justice and compassion for Tyler's mental state. The community of Somerville was left to grapple with the aftermath of the tragedy, hoping to find some sense of closure. The trial and sentencing of Tyler Sullivan were widely covered by local media, including WCIV and the Post and Courier. The case served as a somber reminder of the impact of emotional and mental health issues and the devastating consequences they can have. After Tyler Sullivan was sentenced to 25 years in prison, Life in Somerville, South Carolina, began to slowly move forward. The trial had been a traumatic experience for everyone involved, leaving lasting impacts on the community. David Sullivan, Maria's husband, struggled to cope with the loss of his wife and the imprisonment of his son. He took a leave of absence from his job and sought counseling to deal with his grief and the overwhelming sense of betrayal. Friends and neighbors provided support, but David often felt isolated. He decided to move to Charleston to start fresh, away from the painful memories in Somerville. Tyler's incarceration was a difficult adjustment for him as well. He was sent to a state correctional facility where he began receiving psychological counseling. The prison system offered educational programs, and Tyler enrolled in classes to complete his high school education and began studying music theory, still clinging to his dream of becoming a musician someday. Lilybeth Carter, the neighbor and true crime enthusiast, was deeply affected by the entire ordeal. She continued to write her novel, now incorporating the harrowing experience she had lived through. The local media, including WCIV and the Post and Courier, feature interviews with Lilybeth, discussing her perspective on the case. Despite the unwanted attention, Lilybeth remained focused on her writing, finding solace in her creative work. Detective Martin Coco and Officer Julia Montes, the lead investigators, received commendations for their diligent work in solving the case. The success of their investigation reinforced their commitment to justice and the importance of thorough police work. The case also highlighted the need for increased support for mental health issues, both within families and the broader community. Life in Somerville gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the memory of Maria Rodarty Sullivan and the tragic events that unfolded remained etched in the hearts of those who knew her. The town's resolve to support mental health initiatives and honor Maria's legacy became a lasting tribute to her life. Lisa Turner was a 45-year-old stay-at-home mom who lived in Pineville, North Carolina, an upper-middle-class suburb of Charlotte. Lisa was very active in her community. She was a member of the local PTA, where she organized fundraisers and events for the school. She was also a devoted member of her church's choir, where she sang every Sunday. Lisa had a friendly demeanor and was always willing to help others. She was considered a pillar of the community, someone everyone could rely on. Lisa had once dreamed of becoming a teacher, but those dreams were put on hold when she married Rod Turner, a successful corporate lawyer, and decided to focus on raising their two children, Carmel, 17, and Militia, 14. Despite her busy life, Lisa always found time for her family and friends. Behind her perfect suburban life, Lisa felt unfulfilled and lonely. Rob, 48, had been working long hours at his job, dealing with high-profile banks and helping them find legal loopholes to evict people from their homes during the Great Recession. This created a distance between them, and Lisa often felt like she was living in a gilded cage. She craved excitement and attention, something she wasn't getting at home. In the days before her death, Lisa was busy with her usual activities. She was planning the church's upcoming Easter event, making decorations and organizing volunteers. She was also seen at the local Starbucks, sipping a latte and chatting with friends. To the outside world, Lisa seemed happy and content, but inside she was struggling. Lisa's personality was warm and welcoming. She had a smile for everyone and a kind word for those in need. Her friends described her as generous and caring. She dreamed of a life where she felt truly loved and appreciated. However, little did anyone know Lisa had found this attention in the arms of Jason Brace Collins, the 18-year-old son of her neighbor. Lisa's secret affair with Jason provided the thrill she longed for. She documented her feelings and experiences in a hidden journal, expressing the excitement and guilt she felt. In her final days, Lisa was torn between her duties as a mother and wife and her desire for something more. However, on the morning of March 21, 2012, Lisa's life would be tragically cut short, leaving the community of Pineville in shock and mourning. On the morning of March 21, 2012, around 7:30 a.m., Rob Turner came home early from a business trip to surprise his wife. He had been away in New York City for a meeting with a big bank client and took an early flight back to Pineville. Expecting to find Lisa making breakfast for their kids, Rob instead walked into a scene of horror. When Rob entered the kitchen, he found Lisa lying on the floor in a pool of blood. The room was a mess with broken dishes and blood splatters on the walls and floor. Lisa had been shot and stabbed multiple times. Even more shocking, the number 3-04 was carved into her stomach. Rob, in complete shock, dropped his suitcase and rushed to her side, but it was clear she was already gone. Rob immediately called 911. His voice trembled as he told the dispatcher about the scene he had walked into. He kept repeating, she's gone, over and over. The dispatcher tried to keep him calm and instructed him to wait for the police to arrive. Rob stayed by Lisa's side, crying and holding her hand, unable to comprehend what had happened. The first police officer arrived within minutes. Officer Diller, who was on patrol nearby, responded to the call. When she entered the house and saw the scene, she was stunned but quickly took control of the situation. She guided Rob away from the body and secured the area, waiting for the detectives to arrive. Rob Turner was still in shock. He could barely speak as the officers tried to question him about the events leading up to his discovery. He kept saying he couldn't believe this was happening and that Lisa was gone. Lisa's body was taken to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy, while the detectives began their investigation. The news of Lisa's murder quickly spread through Pinville. It was reported on local TV stations like WSOC TV, and neighbors gathered outside the Turner home, trying to understand how such a terrible thing could happen in their quiet community. The Pinville police arrived quickly after Rob Turner's 911 call on March 21, 2012. Officer Natera Miller, who was patrolling nearby, was the first on the scene. She found Rob in a state of shock, holding Lisa's hand. Officer Miller immediately secured the area and called for backup. Detective Tiana Williams and Officer Mark Vidria, both seasoned investigators, arrived soon after. Detective Williams, known for her meticulous nature, surveyed the chaotic crime scene. The kitchen was a mess. Broken dishes and blood were everywhere. Lisa had been shot and then stabbed multiple times. The number 304 was carved into her stomach, a chilling and mysterious detail. Detective Williams and Officer Vidria began their investigation methodically. They photographed the crime scene from every angle, documenting the blood splatters, broken items, and Lisa's body. They used luminol to detect hidden blood traces and collected fingerprints from surfaces like countertops and doorknobs. DNA samples were taken from various objects, hoping to find something that could identify the killer. The brutality of the attack suggested a crime of passion. Detective Williams considered possible motives. The number carved into Lisa's stomach seemed personal, as if the killer wanted to send a message. They found no signs of forced entry, suggesting Lisa knew her attacker. Rob Turner was taken to the police station for further questioning. Still in shock, he struggled to provide coherent answers. Detective Williams knew they needed to tread carefully with him. They asked about his recent business trip, his relationship with Lisa, and if she had any enemies. Rob mentioned his long work hours and their strained marriage, but denied any involvement in her death. The forensic team continued to gather evidence. They found a partially burnt diary in the fireplace, which contained entries too charred to be legible. This discovery added a new layer to the investigation, revealing something that might possibly be the motive behind the murder. The police also canvassed the neighborhood, interviewing neighbors and searching for witnesses. Some neighbors mentioned hearing loud noises the night before, but didn't think much of it. Others spoke highly of Lisa and her involvement in the community, expressing shock that such a tragedy could occur. Local news stations like WSOC-TV reported the murder, and the community of Pinville was gripped by fear and curiosity. Detective Williams knew they had to solve this case quickly to bring peace to the neighborhood and justice for Lisa Turner. The first person the police investigated was Rob Turner, Lisa's husband. Rob, 48, was a successful corporate lawyer known for his stern, no-nonsense attitude. He worked long hours with high-profile banks, often helping them to find legal loophole that would allow them to evict people from their homes during the Great Recession. This demanding job had created a distance between him and Lisa. Despite this, Rob was deeply committed to his family and had no known history of violence. After discovering Lisa's body on the morning of March 21, 2012, Rob was in a state of shock. He called 911 immediately and was visibly shaken when the police arrived. Detective Tiana Williams and Officer Mark Vidria knew they needed to question Rob thoroughly. They took him to the police station to get his statement. At the station, Rob sat in a small, sterile interrogation room. He was pale and had dark circles under his eyes from lack of sleep. Detective Williams started with basic questions about his trip to New York City, his relationship with Lisa, and our family life. Rob explained that he had been away on a business trip and returned early to surprise Lisa. He described their marriage as strained, but insisted he would never harm her. Rob's responses were cooperative but filled with grief. He repeatedly stated his love for Lisa and his devastation over her death. He admitted that their relationship had been difficult lately due to his long hours at work, but he denied any involvement in her murder. Rob's lawyer, a sharp attorney, sat beside him, ensuring that Rob's rights were protected throughout the interrogation. The police also looked into Rob's alibi. They verified his flight details and confirmed he had indeed been in New York City for a meeting with a major bank. His colleagues and clients backed up his story, providing a solid alibi for the time of the murder. Despite Rob's cooperation and strong alibi, Detective Williams and her team still had to consider him a suspect. The brutality of the crime suggested a personal motive, and as Lisa's husband, Rob was a primary person of interest. However, without any concrete evidence linking him to the scene, the police had to continue their investigation and look into other potential suspects.
The next suspect the police investigated was Jason Brace Collins, the 18-year-old son of Lisa's neighbor. Jason had just graduated from high school and was planning to major in engineering. He was well-liked in the community, known for his charm and good looks. However, a secret affair between him and Lisa had recently come to light, adding a new twist to the investigation.
Detective Tiana Williams and Officer Mark Vidria called Jason in for questioning. Jason arrived at the police station looking nervous. He sat in the interrogation room, fidgeting with his hands. The detectives started by asking him about his relationship with Lisa. Jason admitted to the affair but claimed it was consensual and that he loved her. He said that Lisa had provided him with attention and excitement he couldn't find elsewhere. When asked about his whereabouts on the night of March 20, Jason said he was at home playing video games. He mentioned specific games like Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 3, which was popular at the time. However, his alibi was weak since he was alone and had no one to confirm his story. Jason's behavior during the interrogation was erratic. At times he was calm, but he also showed bursts of anger and frustration. When detectives pressed him about the affair, he became defensive, insisting he would never hurt Lisa. He talked about their relationship, describing it as passionate but not violent. The police found Jason's nervousness suspicious and decided to search his home. They obtained a warrant and conducted a thorough search of his room. They found several explicit love letters from Lisa and some naked photos of them together, further confirming their relationship. However, they didn't find any physical evidence linking Jason to the murder. Neighbors reported seeing Jason acting strangely in the days following Lisa's death. Some said he seemed agitated and jumpy. Others mentioned he was less friendly and more withdrawn than usual. The police took note of these observations, but needed more concrete evidence to make an arrest. The community was shocked by the revelation of the affair. The once charming boy next door was now under a cloud of suspicion. Detective Williams knew they had to dig deeper into Jason's background and relationship with Lisa to uncover the truth. While Jason's affair with Lisa provided a possible motive, the police still needed more evidence to link him directly to the murder. They continued their investigation, knowing that solving this case required careful scrutiny of every detail. The third suspect the police investigated was Paula Brace Collins, Lisa's best friend and next-door neighbor. Paula, 43, was a stay-at-home mom who shared almost everything with Lisa. She was also passionate about running the choir at their church. Recently, Paula had grown suspicious of Lisa's behavior, fearing it might affect their friendship and her family, though she completely unaware of Lisa's affair with her son, Jason. Detective Tiana Williams and Officer Mark Vidria called Paula in for questioning. Paul arrived at the station looking worried but composed. In the small interrogation room, Detective Williams asked Paula about her relationship with Lisa. Paula spoke fondly of Lisa, describing her as a dear friend and confidant. However, Paula admitted she had noticed Lisa acting strangely in recent months and had been concerned. When asked about her whereabouts on the night of March 20, Paula said she was at home, preparing for the upcoming church event. She mentioned specific tasks like making decorations and organizing a volunteer list, tasks she could verify with other church members. Paula's alibi seemed solid, but the detectives pressed further. Detective Williams asked Paula if she knew about Lisa's affair with Jason. Paula was shocked and visibly upset. She insisted she had no idea about the affair and that she would have never condoned such behavior. Her reaction appeared genuine, and the detectives noted her distress. The police then asked Paula if she had any reason to harm Lisa. Paula vehemently denied any motive, stating that she loved Lisa like a sister and would never hurt her. She became emotional, tears welling up in her eyes, and continued to deny any involvement in Lisa's death. To corroborate Paula's alibi, the detectives interviewed other members of the church choir. They confirmed that Paula had been working on church preparations that night. Additionally, neighbors reported seeing Paula at home, further supporting her account. Despite Paula's solid alibi, the police still had to consider her a suspect due to her close relationship with both Lisa and Jason. They searched Paula's house for any evidence but found nothing linking her to the murder. The community of Pineville was shaken as local news stations, including WSOC-TV, Charlotte's local news leader, reported on Paula's questioning, casting suspicion on another pillar of the community. Detective Williams and Officer Vidria continued to investigate, knowing that Paula's strong alibi and lack of evidence made it difficult to link her to the crime. They needed to explore every possible angle to uncover the truth behind Lisa Turner's brutal murder. On the morning of March 25, 2012, a break in the case came with a surprising discovery. It was a sunny day in Pineville, and Detective Tiana Williams received a call from a local resident named Leah Johnson. Leah was walking her dog in a nearby park when she found a small, leather-bound journal partially buried under a bush. She quickly reported it to the police, thinking it might be connected to the recent murder. Detective Williams and Officer Mark Vidria rushed to the park to retrieve the journal. They carefully placed it in an evidence bag and took it back to the station for examination. The journal turned out to be a photocopy of Lisa Turner's secret diary, but one that was too burnt to be able to read, containing detailed and graphic entries about her affair with Jason Brace Collins. It also included her thoughts and feelings about her marriage and her sense of loneliness. The diary entries revealed that Lisa had been planning to end the affair with Jason. She felt guilty about betraying her family and wanted to focus on repairing her marriage and her church work. In addition, Lisa noted strange changes in Jason's behavior. She described how he thought he was lighted by the angel's light and how he badgered her to have sex with him 12 times a day. The last entry, dated March 19, mentioned her intention to meet Jason to break off the relationship. This new evidence shifted the focus of the investigation. Detective Williams and her team realized that Jason's obsession with Lisa might have driven him to murder her when she tried to end things. The diary also included several entries describing how Lisa seduced Jason by bathing naked in her backyard, which had a direct line of sight to his bedroom. These entries painted a calculated and disturbing picture of their intense and tumultuous relationship. The police decided to bring Jason in for further questioning. They confronted him with the diary entries, hoping to get a reaction. Jason initially denied everything, but when faced with the detailed descriptions of their affair, he broke down. He admitted to being in love with Lisa and feeling devastated when she wanted to end things. Detective Williams noticed that Jason's behavior was erratic and decided to have him undergo a psychological evaluation. The results indicated that Jason might be suffering from an undiagnosed bipolar disorder, which could explain his extreme reactions and mood swings. This information added a new layer to the investigation, suggesting that Jason's mental state could have played a role in the crime. The community of Pineville was eager for answers, and the pressure on the police to solve the case increased. Detective Williams and her team continued to piece together the evidence, knowing they were closer to uncovering the truth behind Lisa Turner's tragic death. On March 26, 2012, the police made a breakthrough in the case. After reviewing Lisa Turner's diary and conducting a psychological evaluation of Jason Brace Collins, the evidence pointed clearly to him as the prime suspect. Detective Tiana Williams and Officer Mark Vidria decided it was time to bring Jason in for a formal arrest. Jason Brace Collins, 18, was known for his charm and good looks, but the investigation revealed a darker side. Jason had fallen deeply in love with Lisa, and when she tried to end their affair, he couldn't handle it. His undiagnosed bipolar disorder likely contributed to his extreme reaction. Jason had become possessive and obsessed with Lisa, and the thought of losing her drove him to a fit of rage. The murder occurred on the night of March 20. Jason had gone to the Turner house for sex, knowing Rob was away on a business trip. Lisa let him in, intending to end the relationship. An argument ensued, escalating quickly. Jason, overwhelmed by his emotions, shot Lisa and then stabbed her multiple times. The number 304 carved into her stomach was a final twisted act of control. On the morning of March 26, around 10 a.m., the police arrived at the Brace Collins home to arrest Jason. Detective Williams led the team. They knocked on the door, and Paula Brace Collins answered, shocked to see the police. Jason was inside, and when he saw the officers, he tried to run but was quickly apprehended. Jason's reaction to the arrest was a mix of surprise and resignation. He didn't resist but looked defeated, knowing his actions had caught up with him. He was handcuffed and taken to the police station. During the ride, he remained silent, staring blankly ahead. The news of Jason's arrest spread quickly through Pennville. Local TV stations, including WSOC-TV, reported the developments. The community was in shock, especially those who knew Jason as the charming boy next door. The Turner family, devastated by Lisa's death, expressed relief that the murderer had been caught. They were grateful to the police for their hard work, but still struggled with their loss. At the police station, Jason was booked and charged with first-degree murder. He confessed to the crime during interrogation, detailing how his love for Lisa had turned into an uncontrollable obsession. He admitted that when Lisa tried to break up with him, he snapped and killed her in a fit of rage. Jason's arrest brought some closure to the community, but the pain of losing Lisa Turner lingered. Her family and friends tried to move forward, but the memory of that tragic night remained fresh in their minds. The trial of Jason Brace Collins began on July 15, 2012, at the Mecklenburg County Courthouse. The courtroom was packed with members of the Pineville community, including Lisa Turner's family and friends. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Leah Kastrowitz, a 50-year-old seasoned lawyer known for her tough stance on violent crimes. Leah presented a strong case, detailing how Jason's obsession with Lisa had driven him to commit the murder. Leah Kastrowitz described the brutal nature of the crime, emphasizing the shooting and stabbing, as well as the number 304 carved into Lisa's stomach. She brought in forensic experts to explain the evidence collected at the scene, including DNA and fingerprints linking Jason to the crime. She also presented entries from Lisa's diary, which documented her affair with Jason and her plans to end it. The defense attorney, Richard Blake, was a 45-year-old lawyer known for his calm and methodical approach. He argued that Jason's undiagnosed bipolar disorder played a significant role in his actions. Richard called in medical experts who testified about Jason's mental state, explaining how his condition could have led to a loss of control. He also highlighted Jason's young age and lack of prior criminal records, suggesting that he deserved leniency. Throughout the trial, Lisa Turner's family watched with heavy hearts. Her husband, Rob, and their children, Carmel and Militia, often broke down in tears as they listened to the details of her murder. The community members who attended the trial showed their support for the Turner family, hoping for justice to be served. After weeks of testimonies and deliberations, the jury reached a verdict. On August 12, 2012, Jason Brace Collins was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom was silent as the sentence was read, and Jason showed little emotion, accepting his fate with a blank stare. The verdict brought a sense of closure to Lisa's family and friends, but the pain of losing her remained. They believed the punishment was just, given the brutality of the crime and the impact it had on their lives. The community of Pennville felt a mix of relief and sorrow, knowing that justice had been served but that they have lost a cherished member of their community. Local news stations like WSOC-TV covered the trial extensively, highlighting the emotional journey of the Turner family and the community's response to the verdict. The trial and its outcome were discussed in homes, schools, and churches, as everyone tried to make sense of the tragedy that had shaken their quiet suburb. After the trial of Jason Brace Collins concluded, life in Pennville began to slowly return to normal, though the scars of Lisa Turner's murder still lingered. For the Turner family, the verdict brought a sense of closure, knowing that Jason would spend the rest of his life behind bars for taking Lisa away from them. Rob Turner focused on rebuilding his life and supporting his children, Carmel and Militia, who struggled with the loss of their mother. The community rallied around the Turner family, offering support and comfort in various forms. Neighbors organized meal trains and childcare assistance, easing the burden on Rob as he adjusted to being a single parent. The local church, where Lisa had been an active member, held memorial services in her honor, celebrating her life and the impact she had on others. Meanwhile, Paula Brace Collins faced her own challenges. As Jason's mother and Lisa's best friend, Paula was devastated by the betrayal and the loss of both her son and her closest confidant. She withdrew from church activities and community events, choosing instead to focus on supporting Jason through letters and occasional visits to the prison. Jason, now incarcerated at Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina, adjusted to life behind bars. He received counseling and medication for his bipolar disorder, aiming to manage his condition while serving his sentence. Although he expressed remorse for his actions, Jason understood the severity of his crime and the impact it had on Lisa's family and the community. The community of Pineville remained vigilant but began to move forward, cherishing the memories of Lisa Turner while looking ahead to brighter days. The tragic events of March 2012 had left an indelible mark, but through unity and resilience, Pineville continued to be a close-knit suburb where neighbors supported one another through life's challenges. In the heart of the Great Lakes region, Lana Tompkins was a beacon of potential and creativity. At 26 years old, she hailed from Michigan's bustling city of Detroit, a place that, despite its economic struggles, remained a hub of artistic and cultural diversity. Lana was a graphic designer by trade, her skills honed at the College for Creative Studies, a prestigious institution known for its contribution to the arts. Her portfolio, a vibrant tapestry of digital illustrations and branding projects, was a testament to her ambition and talent. Lana's roots were firmly planted in a close-knit family. She was the youngest daughter of Michael Tompkins, a dedicated automotive engineer at General Motors, and Susan Tompkins, a librarian whose love for books was infectious. Lana's siblings, elder brother David, an up-and-coming lawyer, and sister Emily, a pediatric nurse, shared a strong bond with her, rooted in mutual respect and admiration. Her personality was a blend of warmth and determination, traits that endeared her to friends and colleagues alike. Described by her peers as the life of the party, she had an infectious laugh that could light up even the dullest of rooms. Yet, beneath her cheerful exterior lay a dreamer with aspirations that reached far beyond the confines of her current life. In the days leading up to her untimely death, Lana was brimming with excitement over her plans to expand her design business. She had recently been in talks with potential clients in Toronto, hoping to tap into the city's thriving art scene, which was abuzz with the upcoming Toronto International Film Festival's announcement of its 2009 winners. Social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter, which were hitting their stride in popularity, were abuzz with her latest designs. Her journey to Toronto was not just a business trip. It was a step towards realizing her dream of becoming an internationally recognized designer. Little did she know, the city that symbolized her future aspirations would become the setting of a tragic end to a life full of promise. On December 1, 2009, as the early winter dusk cloaked the city of Toronto in shades of gray, an ominous chill settled over the bustling streets. The Canadian city, usually alive with the sound of holiday shoppers and the sight of festive decorations, was unaware of the grim discovery that would soon disrupt the seasonal cheer. At approximately 7:45 p.m., the Swiss Chalet restaurant, a Canadian staple known for its rotisserie chicken and comfort food, became a crime scene. Nestled on a busy street corner, the establishment was filled with diners seeking refuge from the biting cold that evening. Among them was Janet Wolinski, a local librarian with a penchant for mystery novels, who had stopped by for a quick meal after a long day at the Toronto Public Library. Little did she know that she would stumble upon a real-life horror that no book could prepare her for. Upon entering the ladies' room, Janet was met with a sight that would haunt her for years to come. Lana Tompkins, a visitor from Michigan, lay lifeless on the cold-tiled floor. The victim was dressed for the winter weather, her scarf and coat a stark contrast to the stillness of her form. A luxury belt, an item far removed from the affordable indulgences typically sold in the nearby Eaton Center's holiday market, was wrapped tightly around her neck. Janet's initial shock quickly turned to action as she suppressed her panic and alerted the restaurant manager, who in turn called 911. The dispatcher, trained for emergencies, guided them through the necessary steps while ensuring that the police were promptly en route. Despite the flurry of activity, Janet remained composed, a testament to her strength even in the face of adversity. As the snowflakes of the season began to fall, casting a serene blanket over the city, the warmth inside the Swiss Chalet was irreversibly tainted by the cold reality of a life extinguished too soon. The Toronto Police Service received the distress call from the Swiss Chalet restaurant at 7:52 p.m. on that frigid December evening. Within minutes, the scene was swarming with the flashing lights of emergency vehicles, cutting through the darkness as they arrived with urgency. The first responders were met with a scene that juxtaposed the festive atmosphere typical of the season. A young woman's body lay in the solitude of the restaurant's bathroom, a place where the jovial chatter of diners was replaced by a deafening silence. Detectives James Keller and Sandra Lee, both veterans of the Homicide Squad, led the investigation. Keller, with his gruff demeanor and a reputation for his dogged pursuit of justice, was well known in the corridors of the 52 Division. His partner, Lee, brought a methodical and detail-oriented approach to the case, her skills honed by years on the force and a keen understanding of the city's diverse communities. The crime scene was meticulously preserved, with the area cordoned off to prevent contamination. Forensic teams donned protective suits as they entered the scene, a procedure that had become almost routine in a city that had seen its share of violent crimes. The air was thick with the scent of disinfectant, a stark contrast to the heavy aroma of gravy and fries that wafted from the kitchen. Lana Tompkins' body showed no immediate signs of a struggle, suggesting she may have known her assailant or been taken by surprise. The murder weapon, a belt from a luxury department store, hinted at a personal attack. Such items were not commonly found in the possession of the average Torontonian. As the forensic team collected evidence, they employed the latest in crime scene technology, including alternate light source imaging and 3D crime scene reconstruction, tools that were just coming into their own at the end of the decade. The meticulous collection of fingerprints and DNA samples was a race against time, with the knowledge that each passing moment could lead the killer further from their grasp. The crime had been committed with a chilling precision that left the seasoned detectives unsettled. As the night wore on, the realization that this case would not be a simple one was dawning on everyone involved. The city of Toronto, normally abuzz with excitement over the upcoming Winter City Festival, was now overshadowed by the specter of a murderer in its midst. As the investigation unfolded, attention turned to Laird Chevalier, a 23-year-old janitor employed at the Swiss Chalet restaurant where Lana Tompkins' body was found. Chevalier, originally from Sherbrooke, Quebec, had moved to Toronto in search of better prospects and was known among his colleagues for his quiet demeanor and punctuality. The young janitor lived a modest life in a small apartment cluttered with architectural blueprints and design magazines, remnants of his abandoned dream to become an architect. A dream thwarted by financial constraints in the global economic downturn of 2008. His social media profiles, sparse and infrequently updated, offered no insights into his personal life, presenting a challenge for the detectives trying to piece together his background. During the interrogation, held in the sterile confines of an interview room at the police station, Chevalier maintained a calm exterior. The detectives, skilled in the art of questioning, probed for inconsistencies in his account of the evening in question. He claimed to have been restocking supplies at the time of the murder, a routine task that left him largely unaccounted for during the critical window. His alibi was met with skepticism. The investigators, aware of the pressures faced by service workers in the city, often highlighted in exposés by the Toronto Star, considered the possibility of a crime of opportunity. However, without a clear motive or evidence linking him to the crime, their suspicions remained unconfirmed. Throughout the questioning, Chevalier cooperated fully, his responses measured and devoid of the defensiveness typical of a guilty conscience. His hands, though roughened by manual labor, showed no signs of involvement in a violent act. The detectives were left to ponder whether his calmness was a facade or a genuine indication of innocence. As the interrogation concluded, the police were no closer to proving Chevalier's involvement in the murder. The investigation would have to delve deeper into the lives of Lana Tompkins and the other individuals connected to the case to uncover the truth behind the tragedy. Nearly 4 days after the tragic discovery of Lana Tompkins, the city of Toronto was shaken once again. On December 5, 2009, Robin Kwan, an 18-year-old high school student, was found dead in the bathroom of a Canadian Tire store on Yonge Street, a bustling retail hub especially crowded during the holiday season. Like Lana, Robin was strangled with a belt that seemed out of place amidst the rows of automotive parts and home essentials, a belt that, upon further investigation, was traced to the same luxury department store chain. Robin, a recent immigrant from Hong Kong, had moved to Canada with her parents in hopes of a better future. She was described by her classmates at Jarvis Collegiate Institute as a bright and ambitious student, her dreams of studying medicine at the University of Toronto driving her to excel academically. Her part-time job at Canadian Tire was a step towards independence and financial support for her education. The investigation led to an interrogation of her coworkers, one of whom was present on the evening of her death. The store manager, a middle-aged man named Douglas Peters, was visibly distraught as he recounted the events of the night. He described Robin as a diligent and reliable employee, her customer service always accompanied by a friendly smile. Social media platforms like Facebook, then at the height of their emerging influence, became a valuable tool in the investigation. Detectives scoured Robin's online interactions for any sign of conflict or distress, but found nothing beyond the usual teenage discourse and aspirations. The police, determined to find a connection between the two murders, questioned Robin's friends and family with sensitivity, understanding the cultural nuances of her community. Her parents, overwhelmed by grief, struggled to comprehend the senseless loss of their daughter, their dreams shattered in an instant. Despite the meticulous interrogation of those within Robin's immediate circle, the police found no clear motive or suspect. The killer remained at large, his or her identity shrouded in mystery, leaving the city's residents in a state of heightened anxiety and fear. The investigation took a pivotal turn on the morning of December 7, 2009. A gray overcast sky loomed over Toronto, a reflection of the somber mood that had enveloped the city since the string of unsettling murders. The crisp winter air was heavy with anticipation as the Toronto Police Service worked tirelessly to connect the dots between the two cases. A breakthrough came when a loss prevention officer from Holt Renfrew, an upscale department store renowned for its curated selection of luxury goods, contacted the authorities. The officer had been reviewing security footage as part of the store's routine protocols heightened during the holiday shopping frenzy. Amidst the footage, a figure caught their attention, a young man purchasing several high-end belts, the same type used in the murders. The surveillance video timestamp coincided with the days leading up to the first murder. The young man's face was clear, his demeanor calm as he made the transactions. The footage was promptly handed over to the police, who disseminated stills to local media outlets, including CP24 and the Globe and Mail, in a bid to solicit the public's help in identifying the individual. The response was swift. Tips flooded in, and the public's vigilance was palpable. Social media buzzed with activity as the images circulated on Twitter and Facebook, where concerned citizens shared information and expressed their unease about the brazen nature of the crimes. Detectives Keller and Lee analyzed the footage, noting the suspect's confidence and the ease with which he navigated the upscale environment. The belts, an accessory to fashion for most, had become an instrument of death in his hands. As the day progressed, the weather took a turn and light snow began to fall, blanketing the city in a deceptive calm. But the police were far from tranquil, as this new evidence presented a tangible lead. The race was on to identify the young man before he could strike again, and with the city on edge, the pressure was mounting to bring the perpetrator to justice. The investigation's urgency intensified on December 9, 2009, as another life was claimed under chillingly similar circumstances. Yaira Dominguez, a 21-year-old single mother and recent immigrant from Holguin, Cuba, was found in the staff bathroom of an A&W restaurant, her life extinguished by the same method, a luxury belt, now a grim signature of the killer. Yaira, who had sought a new beginning in Canada for herself and her young daughter, worked tirelessly at the counter, serving customers with a hopeful smile. Her aspirations to enroll in a nursing program at Ryerson University were fueled by a determination to provide a better life for her child. The A&W on Queen Street, often bustling with locals and tourists alike, was a stark contrast to the quiet tragedy that unfolded within its walls. The police, now grappling with a serial killer, focused their investigation on the individual captured in the Holt Renfrew security footage. The manhunt led them to James Deacon Price, a 17-year-old high school student from one of Canada's most prestigious private schools. Deacon Price, the only child of a prominent Bay Street financier and a socialite known for her philanthropic endeavors, lived a life of privilege that was well documented in the society pages of the Toronto Star. During his interrogation, Deacon Price's demeanor was unsettling. He was neither overtly nervous nor particularly cooperative, responding to the detective's questions with a nonchalance that belied the gravity of the situation. His digital footprint revealed a trail of arrogance, with social media posts that showcased a lavish lifestyle and a sense of entitlement that was out of touch with the economic reality faced by many Torontonians post-recession. The police probed for a motive, delving into Deacon Price's past and his relationships. His peers described him as aloof and often dismissive of those he deemed beneath him. Yet, there was no clear reason why he would target victims like Lana, Robin, and Yaira, women who were strangers to him, each battling their own struggles and chasing their dreams in a city that promised opportunity. As the interrogation continued, the detectives were left to ponder whether Deacon Price's actions were the result of a deeply rooted pathology or a perverse desire to exert control over the vulnerable. The answers, however, remained just out of reach, leaving the investigators to piece together the puzzle of a young man's descent into darkness. Amidst the backdrop of a snow-dusted Toronto, a narrative of privilege and malice began to unfold. By mid-December 2009, the city, usually preoccupied with the festive spirit and the recent Grey Cup victory of the Montreal Alouettes, found its attention riveted on a series of brutal murders. The common thread, a luxury belt used as a garrote, led investigators to James Deacon Price, a 17-year-old student from a prestigious private school. Deacon Price, the progeny of wealth and status, stood in stark contrast to his victims, women striving for betterment amidst the economic aftershocks that continued to reverberate from the 2008 financial crisis. His life, documented in the society pages and on nascent social media platforms, was punctuated by galas and exclusive events, a stark departure from the everyday struggles of Lana Tompkins, Robin Kwan, and Yaira Dominguez. The investigation revealed a chilling portrait of the young man. Despite his seemingly idyllic upbringing, Deacon Price harbored a morbid curiosity. His internet history, scrutinized by cybercrime specialists, unveiled a fascination with the macabre and the mechanics of death, a digital trail that added a layer of complexity to the case. In a coldly calculated manner, Deacon Price had sought out his victims, each selected with a predator's precision. The belts, purchased from high-end retail stores like Holt Renfrew, were not just tools but trophies, selected to satisfy a twisted desire for power and control. It was a desire he confessed to during interrogation, stating with chilling detachment that he wanted to know what it felt like to end a life. The motive, as articulated by Deacon Price, was as banal as it was horrifying: a quest for sensation, an experiment in mortality devoid of any personal vendetta against the victims. He believed his affluent background made him untouchable, a belief that would soon be disproven by the weight of evidence against him. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, the detectives faced the daunting task of proving Deacon Price's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The city watched, its collective breath held, as the wheels of justice began to turn against a young man who had stepped far beyond the bounds of society's norms. The morning of December 11, 2009, dawned with a brittle clarity over Toronto, the city's iconic CN Tower piercing the sky of unbroken blue. The metropolitan area was still reeling from the revelations surrounding the high-profile case that had dominated headlines in the Globe and Mail and the incessant chatter on talk radio stations like CFOB. The Toronto Police Service, armed with incontrovertible evidence and a confession, prepared to make an arrest that would resonate through the corridors of power in the city. In the affluent neighborhood where James Deacon Price resided, opulent homes were adorned with tasteful Christmas decorations, a stark contrast to the somber task at hand. The young suspect, heir to a family legacy of wealth and influence, was apprehended at his family's stately residence, a place that had been featured in the glossy pages of Toronto Life magazine. The arrest was executed with precision, the culmination of countless hours of investigation by a task force determined to see justice served. Detectives Keller and Lee, accompanied by uniformed officers, approached the Deacon Price home as the first light of day reflected off the freshly fallen snow. The suspect, confronted with the reality of his situation, displayed a flicker of surprise before his expression settled into one of resigned acceptance. The reaction of Deacon Price, who had so cavalierly confessed to his heinous acts, was one of detached acknowledgement, a far cry from the arrogance he had exhibited in his online persona and in the interrogation room. As he was led away in handcuffs, the gravity of his fate seemed to settle upon him, a stark departure from the invulnerability he had once assumed. Meanwhile, the families of the victims, who had been notified of the impending arrest, experienced a tumult of emotions. Relief mingled with sorrow, the reality that nothing could bring back their loved ones setting in. The arrest, while a closure of sorts, was also a reminder of the gaping wounds left by the loss of Lana, Robin, and Yaira. As the news of the arrest spread, the city of Toronto breathed a collective sigh of relief. The imminent threat was contained, but the scars left by the actions of James Deacon Price would linger in the city's collective memory for years to come. The trial of James Deacon Price commenced in the spring following a winter that had seen Toronto gripped by the chilling narrative. The old City Hall Courthouse, a Romanesque revival building that had stood as a symbol of justice since the late 1800s, was the stage for a legal battle that would capture the attention of the nation. The media, from CBC News to the smaller local outlets, were assembled, their cameras and microphones poised to document every development. The prosecution was led by Elizabeth Chester, a formidable figure with a reputation for her incisive courtroom tactics. At 45, Chester was a seasoned prosecutor, her career defined by a string of successful convictions. She approached the case with a steely determination, framing Deacon Price as a predator who had exploited his social status to carry out his crimes with a chilling sense of entitlement. The defense was in the hands of Jonathan Hale, a defense attorney known for his eloquent arguments and charismatic presence in the courtroom. Hale, at 50, had made a name for himself representing some of the city's most challenging cases. He contended that Deacon Price, despite his confession, was a product of a society that glorified wealth and neglected the mental health of its youth. Throughout the proceedings, the courtroom was heavy with emotion. The victims' families, present at each day of the trial, sat with a dignified composure that occasionally gave way to tears as the details of their loved ones' final moments were laid bare. The public gallery, often filled to capacity, listened with rapt attention as witnesses recounted the events leading up to the fateful discoveries in December 2009. As the trial progressed, the city followed the unfolding drama, the case becoming a topic of heated discussion on platforms like Twitter, where the hashtag Deacon Price trial trended for weeks. The trial not only questioned the morality of the accused, but also held up a mirror to the societal divisions and disparities that had allowed such a tragedy to occur. The courtroom was hushed as the trial of James Deacon Price reached its climax. After weeks of intense deliberations and testimonies that had been scrutinized by legal experts and armchair analysts alike on forums and in the comment sections of the Toronto Sun, the moment of reckoning had arrived. The city, still under the shadow of the atrocities, awaited justice for Lana, Robin, and Yaira. Elizabeth Chester, her arguments grounded in the stark reality of the evidence, had painted a portrait of a remorseless killer in Deacon Price. The defense, led by Jonathan Hale, had sought to humanize the accused, emphasizing his youth and the psychological complexities that may have led to his actions. The jury, faced with the weight of their civic duty, retreated to consider the fate of the young man whose privileged life had taken such a dark turn. The verdict was delivered on a day that saw the streets of Toronto bustling with the usual cadence of city life, the conversations of passers-by punctuated by the latest hits playing from the storefronts of HMV and Virgin Megastore. Guilty on all counts, the words echoed through the courtroom, a solemn affirmation of the justice system's resolve. Sentencing followed, the judge imposing a life sentence without the possibility of parole for 25 years. The punishment, while severe, sparked debate across the city's diverse neighborhoods and in the opinion columns of the Globe and Mail. Some argued that the sentence was too lenient for the gravity of the crimes, while others pondered the effectiveness of retribution over rehabilitation. For the victims' families, the sentencing brought a measure of closure, though the verdict could not fill the void left by their loss. Their reactions were a blend of relief and sorrow, a complex tapestry of emotions that reflected the irrevocable impact of the crimes. The verdict's ripple effects extended beyond the courtroom, igniting conversations about the societal implications of the case and the nature of justice. As the city moved forward, the legacy of the trial remained, a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the profound consequences of one individual's actions. The conclusion of the trial marked a new chapter for the city of Toronto. As the winter of 2009 became a memory and the cityscape bloomed with the arrival of spring, the community sought to rebuild and find a sense of normalcy after the harrowing events that had unfolded. The bustling streets, once the backdrop for a narrative of horror, slowly returned to their former rhythm, the vibrant pulse of Canada's largest city undiminished. The families of Lana Tompkins, Robin Kwan, and Yaira Dominguez faced the daunting task of moving forward without their loved ones. Their grief was a private affair, each finding solace in different ways, some through advocacy and speaking out against violence, others in the quiet remembrance of the lives so cruelly taken. The pain of loss was a constant companion, but so too was the strength they found in their communities and in each other. Detectives Keller and Lee, the faces of the investigation, received commendations for their work. Yet the accolades did little to erase the images and testimonies that would linger in their minds long after the case was closed. They continued their service, their resolve strengthened by the knowledge that their efforts had brought a measure of justice to the bereaved. As for James Deacon Price, his conviction and subsequent incarceration became the subject of continued media interest. True crime podcasts and television specials analyzed every facet of the case, from his privileged upbringing to the psychological profile that emerged during the trial. In prison, Deacon Price became another inmate, his notoriety a stark departure from the life of luxury he had once known. The broader community grappled with the implications of the case, discussions about mental health, societal privilege, and the criminal justice system taking center stage in university lectures and coffee shop debates. The murders had left an indelible mark on the city's consciousness, prompting reflection on the vulnerabilities and inequalities that existed within the urban tapestry. As years passed, the case of the James Deacon Price remained a cautionary tale, a reminder of the darkness that can lie beneath a facade of normalcy in the enduring quest for justice in the face of senseless violence. The case of the Nepo baby serial killer serves as a grim reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind a facade of privilege. It's a story that shook Toronto and one that true crime case files will never forget. Lynette Vero Werner was a 34-year-old woman who lived in Salt Lake City, Utah. She worked as an elementary school teacher at Rose Park Elementary School. Known for her kindness, patience, and dedication, Lynette loved her students and always tried to help them learn and grow. She had a gentle soul and was deeply loved by her community. Lynette was also an avid reader. She enjoyed spending her evenings with a good book, often picking up the latest bestsellers from local bookstores like the King's English Bookshop. Her favorite genre was historical romance, and she the books of author Joyce Lehman, who was popular among female readers at the time. Lynette also loved gardening. She spent many weekends in her backyard, planting flowers and vegetables. She found peace in watching her garden grow and bloom. Lynette was married to Mike Werner, a charming man who seemed like the perfect husband. They had a cozy home in a quiet neighborhood. Lynette was close to her family, especially her younger sister, Julie, who lived nearby. Julie often visited Lynette to help with the garden or just to chat over a cup of coffee. Lynette's parents, who lived in Idaho, would call her regularly to catch up and hear about her life. In May 2005, Lynette was excited about the upcoming summer break. She was planning a new project for her students that involved reading and gardening. She believed it would help them learn about both literature and nature. She was also looking forward to spending more time in her garden, which was beginning to bloom with roses and tulips. Lynette's colleagues at Rose Park Elementary admired her dedication. She was always the first to arrive and the last to leave, making sure everything was perfect for her students. Her principal often praised her for her hard work and commitment. Lynette's dreams were simple but profound. She wanted to inspire her students, create a loving home, and make a difference in her community. Her life seemed perfect, and she was happy and fulfilled. But in the days leading up to her death, everything changed. The peaceful life Lynette had built was shattered by a tragic event that no one saw coming. On the morning of May 12, 2005, the weather was clear and sunny in Salt Lake City, Utah. At around 7:30 a.m., Mike Werner called 911, his voice filled with panic. He told the dispatcher that he had found his wife, Lynette Vero Werner, unresponsive in their bathtub. Earlier that morning, Mike had woken up and noticed that Lynette was not in bed. Thinking she might be in the bathroom, he knocked on the door but got no response. When he opened the door, he found Lynette lying in the bathtub, the water still. She wasn't moving. Mike tried to wake her but quickly realized something was very wrong. The 911 call was short and frantic. Mike sounded scared and desperate as he explained what had happened. Within minutes, an ambulance arrived at their home, followed closely by the police. Paramedics tried to revive Lynette, but soon pronounced her dead at the scene. Neighbors began to gather outside the Werner home, whispering among themselves. Some of them had seen Lynette the day before, smiling and waving as she tended to her garden. The news of her death spread quickly through the neighborhood, leaving everyone in disbelief. The local news stations, including KUTV and Fox 13, soon picked up the story. Reporters arrived at the scene, setting up cameras and interviewing neighbors who described Lynette as a lovely and kind person. The media coverage added to the tension and sadness that hung over the neighborhood. As the day went on, Lynette's family was notified. Her sister, Julie, arrived in tears, unable to comprehend what had happened. The tragic news left everyone who knew Lynette in shock, struggling to understand how such a vibrant and caring person could be gone so suddenly. On May 12, 2005, after paramedics pronounced Lynette Vero Werner dead, Detective Sarah Adelaide and Officer James Elizette began their investigation. They arrived quickly, within 10 minutes of the 911 call. The first thing they noticed was how calm and tidy the bathroom appeared. There were no signs of struggle, and everything seemed in place. Lynette was found in the bathtub, the water still and clear. She was fully clothed, wearing her usual evening attire. The room was brightly lit by the morning sun streaming through the window. The scene suggested an accidental drowning, but Detective Adelaide wanted to be thorough. She knew that sometimes appearances could be deceiving. Mike Werner, Lynette's husband, was sitting on the living room couch, looking pale and shaken. He seemed in shock and kept repeating, "How could this happen?" Detective Adelaide and Officer Elizette approached him gently, asking him to describe what had happened. Mike repeated his story. Lynette had taken a bath the night before, and he had gone to bed early. When he woke up, he found her in the tub, unresponsive. Detective Adelaide noticed that Mike's story was consistent, but she still had questions. She asked him about Lynette's health and whether she had any medical conditions that could explain what happened. Mike shook his head, saying Lynette was healthy and had no known issues. He seemed genuinely confused and distressed. The police then turned their attention to the rest of the house. They looked for anything unusual or out of place. They checked the bedroom, kitchen, and living room, but everything seemed normal. There were no signs of forced entry or anything that would suggest foul play. Forensics teams arrived and began their work. They took samples of the water from the bathtub, checked for fingerprints, and collected any potential evidence. They used luminol to check for any hidden traces of blood, but nothing was found. The team also took Lynette's body for an autopsy to determine the exact cause of death. By the end of the day, the initial investigation suggested that Lynette's death was an accident. There were no obvious signs of foul play. However, Detective Adelaide remained cautious. She knew that sometimes the truth took time to uncover. She decided to keep a close eye on the autopsy results and any other evidence that might come up. The police wrapped up their work at the scene, leaving the Werner home quiet and still, a stark contrast to the chaos and confusion of the morning. Lynette's death left a deep sadness in the neighborhood, as everyone waited for more answers. In the weeks following Lynette Vero Werner's death, the police continued their investigation. Despite the initial conclusion of accidental drowning, Detective Sarah Adlai wanted to be sure they hadn't missed anything. During their review, a possible suspect emerged, Richie Alvey, a 65-year-old felon and registered sex offender who had been seen walking near Lynette's home on the day she died. Richie Alvey was known in the neighborhood. He had a long criminal history and was known for his erratic behavior. Some neighbors reported seeing him loitering around Lynette's street several times. His presence made people uneasy, and the police decided to question him. Detective Adelaide and Officer Elizette brought Richie in for interrogation at the Salt Lake City Police Department. Richie was disheveled and nervous when he arrived. He claimed he was just passing through the neighborhood on the day Lynette died. When asked about his whereabouts, Richie provided an alibi, saying he spent most of the day at a local diner, Ikeope, which was popular with locals for its affordable meals and classic American diner feel. The detectives checked Richie's alibi. They spoke to the staff at Ikeope, who remembered seeing Richie there for breakfast and lunch. He had been chatting with the regulars and reading the Salt Lake Tribune. The timeline seemed to match up, but the police needed to be thorough. They checked surveillance footage from nearby stores and found Richie on camera during the times he claimed to be at the diner. During the interrogation, Richie was defensive and agitated. He denied any involvement in Lynette's death and insisted he had nothing to do with it. Detective Adelaide observed his body language and noted that while he was nervous, he didn't show signs of lying. The questioning was tense, but eventually Richie's alibi was confirmed, and the police had to let him go. Richie's behavior raised some suspicions, but with a solid alibi and no evidence linking him to the crime scene, the police had no choice but to clear him as a suspect. Detective Adelaide was disappointed but knew she had to follow the evidence. She continued to look into other leads, determined to find out what really happened to Lynette. As the investigation progressed, the community remained on edge. The news of Richie's questioning spread quickly, adding to the local gossip. Neighbors did not believe that he wasn't involved, but they also wanted answers. Lynette's death remained a mystery, and the police were still searching for the truth. 4 years after Lynette Vero Werner's tragic death, another mystery unfolded. In January 2009, Sarah Zadie, a 28-year-old nurse, was found dead at the bottom of the staircase in her home. Sarah was known for her compassion and dedication as a nurse at the University of Utah Hospital. She was also an avid hiker and volunteered at local shelters. On January 19, 2009, a neighbor, Pamela Lamley, found Sarah's body. Pamela had stopped by to check on Sarah after not hearing from her for a few days. When she saw Sarah at the bottom of the stairs, she immediately called 911, her voice shaking with fear. The police and paramedics arrived quickly, finding Sarah dead from what appeared to be a fall. Detective Sarah Adelaide and Officer James Elizette were once again on the case. They arrived at the scene and began their investigation. The staircase was wooden, with no railings. The house was neat and clean, with no signs of a struggle. It seemed like a tragic accident, but Detective Adelaide had a feeling something was off. Sarah's husband, Mike Werner, was questioned again. He seemed deeply grieved and distraught, much like he had been after Lynette's death. Mike said he had been at work when the accident happened. He worked as an insurance agent at State Farm, the insurance provider who's always there for you, and his colleagues confirmed his alibi. Mike's demeanor was calm and cooperative during the interrogation. He expressed his shock and sadness, insisting he couldn't understand how such a thing could happen. Detective Adelaide found his reactions consistent with someone who had just lost a loved one, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Sarah's friends and family were devastated by her sudden death. They described her as a resilient and empathetic person who was always there for others. The idea that she could have simply fallen down the stairs seemed hard to believe. Her best friend, Jana, mentioned that Sarah was always careful, especially in her own home. As the police investigated further, they found that Mike had taken out a substantial life insurance policy on Sarah just a few months before her death. This raised suspicions, but there was no concrete evidence linking him to the fall. The autopsy showed that Sarah had died from head trauma consistent with a fall, and there were no signs of foul play. Despite the suspicious circumstances, the lack of physical evidence made it difficult to pursue charges. The police were left with unanswered questions and a sense of unease. Mike Werner remained free, but the investigation into his wife's deaths continued. Detective Adelaide knew she had to stay vigilant. The pattern of accidents was troubling, and she was determined to uncover the truth. The community, still haunted by the mysterious deaths, hoped for answers as the investigation pressed on. Janet Werner, the third wife of Mike Werner, died on June 3, 2013. She was 49 years old and worked as an accountant. Janet was known for her meticulous nature and great sense of humor. She loved solving puzzles and was very close to her family and friends. People described her as loyal and trustworthy. On the evening of June 3rd, Janet was found dead in her garage from what appeared to be carbon monoxide poisoning caused by a faulty heater. Mike, yet again, was the one who found her and called 911 sounding distraught. The initial investigation ruled her death an accident, just like the previous cases involving Mike's wives. Detective Sarah Adelaide decided to look deeper into Janet's death after receiving new evidence linking Mike to suspicious life insurance policies. Janet had taken out a large life insurance policy just months before her death, with Mike as the sole beneficiary. This pattern was too significant to ignore. Detective Adelaide and Officer James Elizette went to Janet's home to re-examine the scene. The garage was tidy, and the heater appeared to be the source of the carbon monoxide. But upon closer inspection, the forensics team found signs of tampering with the heater, suggesting it was no accident. This discovery raised serious questions about Mike's involvement. The police questioned Mike again, this time with more intensity. Mike was now 45 years old, handsome as always and charming, always portraying himself as a grieving widower. However, under pressure, his calm demeanor began to crack. He insisted that Janet's death was a tragic accident and denied any wrongdoing. Janet's friends and family were interviewed as well. They described Janet as a happy and healthy woman who was always cautious. Her sudden death was a shock to everyone. Her sister, Karen, recalled that Janet had mentioned feeling uneasy about the new heater, but didn't think much of it at the time. The police also discovered that Mike had a history of financial troubles. Despite his successful appearance, he had accumulated significant debt, but life insurance payouts from his wife's deaths seemed to be a way for him to solve his financial problems. This provided a strong motive for the police to consider. The investigation revealed more disturbing details about Mike's past. Before Lynette's, Sarah and Janet, Mike had been married to a woman named Jennifer, who also died under mysterious circumstances. This pattern of deaths and life insurance claims made it clear that Mike was not just a grieving husband, but possibly a serial killer. With this new information, Detective Adelaide felt they were getting closer to the truth. The evidence against Mike was mounting, and it was only a matter of time before they could prove his involvement in the deaths of his wives. The investigation was now focused on uncovering every detail to bring justice for Lynette's, Sarah, Janet, and Jennifer. Janet's tragic death, once thought to be an accident, was now seen as part of a sinister pattern. The police were determined to uncover the full extent of Mike Werner's actions and hold him accountable. On June 20, 2013, the sunny weather in Salt Lake City set the stage for a major breakthrough in the case. Detective Sarah Adelaide and her team had gathered enough evidence to arrest Mike Werner for the murders of his wives. Mike, 45, was a charming and successful insurance agent. He seemed like the perfect husband, but his calm exterior hid a dark history of manipulation and greed. The investigation revealed that Mike had married and killed 4 women: Jennifer, Lynette, Sarah, and Janet. Each time he collected large life insurance payouts, which he used to cover his financial troubles. Mike was also found to be a member of a disturbing website called wifekillcompetition.net, where members competed to see how many wives they could kill without getting caught. Apparently, Mike, with only 4 dead wives, wasn't even a top scorer. A Japanese man on the site managed to marry and kill 23 women without getting caught. Detective Adelaide and Officer James Elazette planned Mike's arrest carefully. They wanted to ensure they had everything they needed to bring him to justice. At 9:00 a.m., they arrived at Mike's office where he was meeting with a client. The police entered the building calmly and approached Mike, who was taken by surprise. He looked shocked as Detective Adelaide read him his rights, then placed him in handcuffs. Mike's reaction was one of disbelief. He protested his innocence, claiming he loved his wives and would never harm them. However, the evidence was overwhelming. The police had proof of his involvement in all 4 deaths, including the tampered heater that killed Janet and the life insurance policies he took out on each wife shortly before their deaths. The news of Mike's arrest spread quickly. Local news stations, including KUTV and Fox 13, covered the story extensively. Reporters gathered outside the police station, and neighbors expressed their shock and relief that Mike had been arrested. The families of Lynette, Sarah Janet, and Jennifer were notified. Lynette's sister, Julie, was relieved but also devastated by the confirmation of Mike's guilt. Sarah's best friend, Emily, expressed similar feelings, saying justice is finally being served, but it doesn't bring Sarah back. Detective Adelaide felt a sense of accomplishment. She had worked tirelessly on the case, and now the man responsible for these tragic deaths was behind bars. The community, still reeling from the revelations, began to feel a sense of closure. Mike Werner's arrest marked the end of a long and complex investigation. The police had uncovered the truth, and justice was finally being served. The families of the victims could now begin to heal, knowing that the man who caused so much pain would face the consequences of his actions. In early 2014, Mike Werner's trial began. The courtroom was packed with reporters, family members, and curious onlookers. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Karen Anasilia, a 45-year-old known for her sharp mind and dedication to justice. She presented a compelling case against Mike, detailing how he had systematically killed his wives for life insurance money. Anasilia started by outlining the pattern of deaths. Jennifer in 2002, Lynette in 2005, Sarah in 2009, and Janet in 2013. Each wife had a large life insurance policy, and each death was initially ruled an accident. Anasilia showed evidence of Mike's financial troubles and his membership in the wifekillcompetition.net website. She argued that Mike was a cold-blooded killer who saw his wives as means to an end. The defense attorney, Robert Burke, was a 50-year-old with a reputation for defending high-profile clients. Burke argued that Mike loved his wives and that their deaths were tragic accidents. He claimed the insurance policies were standard precautions and that Mike had no motive to harm his loved ones. Burke also tried to discredit the prosecution's evidence, suggesting that the tampering with the heater could have been a coincidence. Throughout the trial, emotions ran high. Lynette's sister, Julie, often broke down in tears, while Sarah's best friend, Emily, glared at Mike from the gallery. The families of the victims wanted justice and closure for their lost loved ones. After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for 3 days. On February 10, 2014, they returned with a verdict. Mike Werner was found guilty of first-degree murder for the deaths of Jennifer, Lynette, Sarah, and Janet. The courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers as the verdict was read. Mike was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She called his actions calculated and heinous, and expressed her hope that the sentence would bring some peace to the victims' families. Mike showed little emotion as the sentence was handed down. His once charming demeanor was replaced by a blank stare. The families of the victims had mixed reactions. Lynette's sister, Julie, said, "I'm relieved he's finally being held accountable, but nothing can bring my sister back." Sarah's friend, Emily, added, "This is justice, but it's also a reminder of the pain he caused." The trial and sentencing had a profound impact on the community. Many were shocked that such evil could exist behind a facade of normalcy. The case also brought attention to the importance of thorough investigations and the potential dangers of life insurance policies. In the aftermath, the victims' families began to heal, knowing that Mike Werner would never harm anyone again. The police officers and detectives involved felt a sense of closure, having brought a dangerous man to justice. The community, while still grappling with the horror of the crimes, took solace in the fact that justice had been served. Following Mike Werner's trial and conviction, life began to slowly return to normal for the families involved, the police, and the community. However, the scars left by the tragic events lingered, reshaping the lives of those touched by the case. For Lynette Vera Werner's family, the trial offered closure, but the pain of her loss remained. Julie, her sister, found solace in connecting with support groups and advocating for victims of domestic violence. She also spearheaded a campaign to raise awareness about the dangers of online forums like wifekillcompetition.net. Sarah Zadie's friends and colleagues at the University of Utah Hospital honored her memory by establishing a scholarship fund in her name. They organized charity events and fundraisers to support causes Sarah was passionate about, such as animal welfare and healthcare access for underserved communities. Janet Werner's family struggled to come to terms with the betrayal by someone they once considered family. They leaned on each other for support, finding strength in their shared memories of Janet's kindness and humor. Together, they planted a garden in her memory, cultivating her favorite flowers and vegetables. As for the community, the case served as a sobering reminder of the dangers that could lurk behind closed doors. It prompted discussions about the importance of vigilance and support for victims of domestic violence. Organizations like the Salt Lake City Domestic Violence Coalition saw an increase in calls for assistance and redoubled their efforts to provide resources and support to those in need. In the aftermath of the trial, Salt Lake City came together to heal and rebuild. While the wounds left by the tragedy would never fully heal, the community found strength in solidarity and a renewed commitment to supporting one another in times of need. Michael Foster was a 28-year-old man who lived in Huntsville, Alabama. He owned a dog kennel called Happy Paws, where he took care of dogs while their owners were away. Michael loved animals and had a special way of making every dog feel loved and safe. His friends and family often said he had a kind heart and a laid-back personality. Michael lived in a small apartment on Pine Street, a cozy place with pictures of dogs on the walls and dog toys scattered around. After finishing school, he decided to open Happy Paws. His business became well known in Huntsville, with many people trusting him with their pets. Michael had a girlfriend named Darla Green. She was a fitness influencer with tens of thousands of followers on YouTube. Darla often posted videos of her workouts and talked about the importance of women getting strong and muscled. However, their relationship had problems. Darla was known to be very controlling and jealous, which led to many arguments between them. Michael was well-liked by everyone who knew him. He was also an active member of the Huntsville community, volunteering at animal shelters and participating in local events like the Panoply Arts Festival. Michael was known for his friendly nature and his ability to make everyone feel welcome. In the days before his death, Michael was excited about a new project at Happy Paws. He was planning to expand the kennel to accommodate more dogs and offer new services. He talked about his plans with his family and friends, who were all supportive. Michael also loved football and was looking forward to watching the upcoming March Madness games with his friends. Despite these issues, Michael remained focused on his dreams and his love for animals. He was looking forward to the future and all the possibilities it held. Sadly, his life was cut short in a tragic and violent way. On the morning of March 15, 2016, Michael Foster's body was discovered in his apartment. It was around 9:00 a.m. when his neighbor, Alex Leeson, noticed something strange. Alex lived in the apartment next to Michael's on Pine Street. That morning, Alex heard Michael's dog barking nonstop. This was unusual because Michael always made sure his dogs were well behaved. Alex decided to check on Michael. He knocked on the door, but there was no answer. Worried, he used the spare key Michael had given him for emergencies. When Alex opened the door, he immediately knew something was wrong. The apartment was a mess. Furniture was overturned, and there were signs of a struggle everywhere. Alex walked further into the apartment and saw Michael lying on the living room floor. Michael was motionless, and there was a phone charger cord wrapped tightly around his neck. Alex was shocked and terrified. His heart raced as he realized what he was seeing. Trying to stay calm, Alex quickly took out his phone and dialed 911. The 911 operator answered, and Alex, his voice shaking, explained what he had found. He told him about the barking dog, the messy apartment, and finding Michael on the floor. The operator assured Alex that help was on the way and instructed him to stay on the line until the police arrived. Minutes later, the sound of sirens filled the air. Police cars and an ambulance pulled up to the apartment building. They entered the apartment and immediately checked Michael for any signs of life. Sadly, it was clear that Michael was dead. The paramedics arrived and confirmed what the officers already knew. Michael Foster was gone. Officers spoke to Alex, who was still in shock but trying to be helpful. He explained everything he had seen and heard that morning. Police began securing the crime scene, making sure no one else could enter the apartment. News of the discovery spread quickly. Local media, including WAFF 48 News, reported on the tragic event. Neighbors gathered outside, whispering in disbelief about what had happened to Michael, the kind man who loved dogs and always had a smile for everyone. The discovery of Michael Foster's body marked the beginning of a complex investigation that would uncover secrets and lead to a shocking conclusion. The police arrived at Michael Foster's apartment quickly after Alex Leeson's 911 call on the morning of March 15, 2016. Detective Sharon Mitchell and her partner, Detective Emerson Carter, were the lead investigators on the case. Detective Mitchell was known for her attention to detail, and Detective Carter was respected for his methodical approach to investigations. When they entered the apartment on Pine Street, they saw a chaotic scene. The living room was in disarray with furniture overturned, and items scattered everywhere. There were clear signs of a struggle. Detective Mitchell immediately noticed the metal phone charger cord wrapped around Michael's neck. It was evident that Michael had been strangled. The detectives began their investigation by carefully examining the crime scene. Detective Mitchell took detailed notes and photographs of everything in the apartment. She pointed out the defensive wounds on Michael's arms, indicating that he had fought back against his attacker. Detective Carter used the fingerprint kit to dust for prints on the furniture and door handles. The crime scene unit arrived with more specialized equipment. They used luminol, a chemical that glows blue when it comes into contact with blood, to look for hidden bloodstains. The living room floor and some pieces of furniture showed traces of blood, suggesting a violent struggle had taken place. Outside, police spoke with neighbors to gather information about any suspicious activity they might have noticed. Several neighbors mentioned hearing loud arguments between Michael and his girlfriend, Darla Green, in the days leading up to his death. This information was noted and would be crucial in the investigation. Back inside the apartment, Detective Carter found a broken picture frame with a photo of Michael and Darla. It was clear that the couple had a tumultuous relationship. The detectives also found Michael's cell phone on the floor. They bagged it as evidence, knowing it could hold important clues. As the investigation continued, Detective Mitchell interviewed Alex Leeson. He described finding Michael's body and the chaos in the apartment. His account matched the evidence the detectives had gathered so far. Alex mentioned that Michael's dog had been barking loudly that morning, which led him to check on his neighbor. The crime scene investigation lasted several hours. By the end of the day, the detectives had gathered a significant amount of evidence. They knew they needed to find out more about Michael's relationships and recent activities to solve the case. The police's thorough and careful work at the crime scene would be the foundation of their investigation into Michael Foster's tragic death. The first suspect in Michael Foster's murder was his girlfriend, Darla Green. Darla was 27 years old and a well-known fitness influencer. She had over 100,000 followers on YouTube, where she posted videos about workouts and healthy living. Darla was muscular and often called herself a muscle girl. She was also rumored to use steroids, which made her personality even more unpredictable. Darla and Michael had been dating for about a year. Their relationship was rocky, with frequent arguments, mostly due to Darla's controlling nature. She was known to be very possessive and jealous, often monitoring Michael's activities and questioning his interactions with others. Friends and neighbors had heard them arguing loudly several times. On March 15, 2016, the police brought Darla in for questioning at the Huntsville Police Department. Detective Sharon Mitchell and Detective Emerson Carter conducted the interview. Darla appeared nervous and defensive from the start. She insisted that she had been at the gym that morning and had no idea what had happened to Michael. The detectives asked Darla about her relationship with Michael. She admitted they had problems but claimed she loved him and would never hurt him. Detective Carter pressed her on the rumors about her using steroids and how it might have affected her behavior. Darla became agitated and denied using any illegal substances, though her aggressive demeanor suggested otherwise. When asked about the night before Michael's death, Darla said they had argued about Michael meeting his ex-girlfriend, Roosevelt Green, who coincidentally was also Darla's mother. She accused Michael of being unfaithful, which he denied. The detectives noted Darla's intense jealousy as a possible motive for the murder. As the interview continued, Darla's story began to show inconsistencies. She couldn't clearly explain her whereabouts during the crucial hours of the morning. Her alibi about being at the gym was shaky, as the gym's security cameras showed no footage of her arriving or leaving. The detectives knew they needed more evidence to confirm Darla's involvement, but her controlling and jealous nature made her a prime suspect. After several hours of questioning, Darla was released, but the detectives kept a close watch on her. They needed to find more evidence to link her to the crime scene. Darla's erratic behavior and the strained relationship with Michael were key points in the ongoing investigation. The second suspect in Michael Foster's murder was his best friend and coworker, Daniel Harris. Daniel, 30 years old, had been friends with Michael for many years. They worked together at Happy Paws, Michael's dog kennel business. Daniel was known for being loyal and supportive, always there for Michael during tough times. Daniel was brought in for questioning at the Huntsville Police Department on March 16, 2016. Detective Sharon Mitchell and Detective Emerson Carter conducted the interview. Daniel was visibly upset about Michael's death, but he cooperated fully with the police. The detectives began by asking Daniel about his relationship with Michael. Daniel spoke fondly of his friend, describing him as kind and dedicated to his work. He mentioned that they spent a lot of time together, both at work and outside of it. Daniel also admitted that he often tried to mediate the arguments between Michael and Darla Green, Michael's girlfriend. When the detectives asked Daniel if he knew of any reason someone would want to hurt Michael, he hesitated. Then, in a quiet voice, Daniel revealed a shocking secret. He and Michael had been involved in a secret sexual relationship. Daniel explained that they had kept it hidden because they feared Darla's reaction. He was worried that Darla might have found out about their relationship and acted violently out of jealousy. Daniel's revelation added a new layer to the investigation. The detectives asked if he thought Darla was capable of harming Michael. Daniel nodded, describing her as controlling and possessive. He mentioned several instances where Darla had shown extreme jealousy, even over small things. The detectives also questioned Daniel about his whereabouts on the morning of March 15. Daniel said he was at home feeling unwell and decided to take the day off from work. He provided the detectives with the names of neighbors who could confirm his story. Detective Mitchell made a note to follow up on Daniel's alibi. Daniel was calm and cooperative throughout the interrogation, but it was clear he was deeply affected by Michael's death. The detectives thanked him for his honesty and assured him they would do everything they could to find the person responsible for Michael's murder. The new information about Michael and Daniel's relationship opened up more questions and potential motives. The detectives knew they needed to dig deeper into the lives of everyone involved to uncover the truth. The third suspect in Michael Foster's murder was Rosa Beth Green, Darla's mother and Michael's ex-girlfriend. Rosa Beth was 56 years old and a high school science teacher. She had remained on friendly terms with Michael even after he started dating her daughter. Rosa Beth was known for being kind and understanding, traits that made her a beloved teacher at Huntsville High School. On March 17, 2016, the police brought Rosa Beth in for questioning. Detectives Sharon Mitchell and Emerson Carter conducted the interview. Rosa Beth appeared calm but worried. She was cooperative and answered all their questions. The detectives began by asking about her relationship with Michael. Rosa Beth explained that she and Michael had dated a few years ago and that she had, quote, the best sex of my life during our time together. She also said they had remained friends after they broke up. She mentioned that they occasionally met for coffee to catch up and talk about life. Rosa Beth admitted that Darla did not like their friendship and often got jealous. When asked about the days leading up to Michael's death, Rosa Beth said she had seen Michael a week before he was killed. They had met at a local Burger King to discuss how Michael could level up his sex life with Darla. Rosa Beth noted that Michael seemed stressed and mentioned problems with Darla, but he didn't go into details. Detective Carter asked Rosa Beth about her whereabouts on the morning of March 15. She stated she was at school, teaching her first period biology class. Several colleagues and students could confirm her presence. The detectives made a note to follow up on her alibi. The conversation then turned to Darla. Rosa Beth expressed concern about her daughter's behavior. She described Darla as controlling and often paranoid about Michael's interactions with other people. Rosa Beth admitted that Darla's jealousy had caused tension between them. She also mentioned her daughter's use of steroids, which seemed to make her more aggressive and unstable. The detectives asked Rosa Beth if she believed Darla was capable of harming Michael. Rosa Beth hesitated but then nodded, saying she feared Darla's jealousy and obsession might have driven her to do something drastic. She shared instances where Darla had acted out in anger, reinforcing the detective's suspicions. Throughout the interview, Rosa Beth remained composed and provided valuable insights into Darla's behavior. The detectives thanked her for her cooperation and assured her they were doing everything they could to find out what happened to Michael. As Rosa Beth left the police station, Detective Mitchell and Detective Carter discussed the new information. Rosa Beth's statements about Darla's jealousy and aggressive behavior added more weight to the growing evidence against Darla. The investigation was moving forward, and the detectives were determined to uncover the truth. On March 20, 2016, 5 days after Michael Foster's body was found, the police received a significant piece of new evidence. It was a rainy afternoon around 3:00 p.m. when Detective Sharon Mitchell got a call from a resident of Michael's apartment building. A resident said she had found something unusual in the building's trash bin. Detective Mitchell and Detective Emerson Carter arrived at the apartment complex and met with Linda. She handed them a small black diary she had found while taking out her garbage. The diary was in rough shape, but it was clear it had belonged to Darla Green, Michael's girlfriend. The detectives took the diary back to the police station to examine it carefully. As they flipped through the pages, they discovered detailed entries about Darla's relationship with Michael. The entries revealed Darla's growing paranoia and jealousy. She wrote about her suspicions that Michael was cheating on her, not just with his ex-girlfriend Rosa Beth Green, but also with a man, which they later confirmed to be Daniel Harris. One entry from a week before Michael's death stood out. Darla had written about installing hidden cameras in Michael's apartment to monitor his every move. She described how she watched him interact with other people and how it fueled her anger and jealousy. The final entry was chilling. Darla wrote about her plan to confront Michael, expressing fear that he was planning to leave her. The diary provided crucial insight into Darla's state of mind and her obsessive behavior. Detective Carter noted that the entries matched the timeline of events leading up to Michael's murder. The detectives decided to search Darla's apartment for the hidden cameras mentioned in the diary. On March 21, the police obtained a search warrant and went to Darla's apartment. They found several small hidden cameras placed around the living room and bedroom. The cameras were connected to a recording device hidden in a closet. The detectives took the device back to the station for analysis. The recordings from the cameras showed Darla spying on Michael. There were videos of him talking on the phone, meeting with friends, and even interacting with Daniel Harris. The recordings provided concrete evidence of Darla's invasive and controlling behavior. They also showed her entering and leaving Michael's apartment at odd hours, including the morning of March 15. With this new evidence, the detectives felt they were closer to solving the case. Darla's actions and the contents of the diary painted a clear picture of her mental state and possible motive for murder. The investigation was far from over, but the pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together. On March 25, 2016, the police finally identified Michael Foster's murderer. Darla Green, Michael's girlfriend, was arrested for his murder. Darla was 27 years old and a fitness influencer with over 100,000 followers on YouTube. Her obsession with controlling Michael and her use of steroids had made her mentally unstable. The detectives pieced together the events leading up to Michael's death from the diary found in Darla's apartment and the hidden camera recordings. The diary detailed Darla's escalating paranoia and jealousy. She suspected Michael of cheating on her with both his ex-girlfriend Rosa Beth Green, who was also Darla's mother, and his best friend Daniel Harris. On the night of March 14, Darla confronted Michael in his apartment. Her anger and jealousy led to a heated argument. The hidden cameras recorded parts of this confrontation. In a fit of rage, Darla grabbed the phone charger cord and strangled Michael. The struggle left the apartment in disarray, and Michael tried to fight back but was overpowered. On the morning of March 15, Darla left the apartment, hoping to make it look like Michael had been attacked by someone else. She went to the gym to establish an alibi, but the gym's security cameras did not capture her presence, weakening her defense. Detectives Sharon Mitchell and Emerson Carter gathered all the evidence and presented it to the district attorney. With the diary, the recordings, and Darla's inconsistent alibi, they had a strong case against her. The police decided to arrest Darla at her apartment. On the afternoon of March 25, the police arrived at Darla's apartment. Detective Mitchell knocked on the door, and Darla answered, looking surprised and nervous. Detective Carter informed her that she was under arrest for the murder of Michael Foster. Darla's face turned pale, and she began to cry, but she did not resist arrest. As Darla was taken away in handcuffs, the news quickly spread. Michael's family was relieved that the murderer had been caught, but devastated by the betrayal from someone they had trusted. They expressed their gratitude to the police for their hard work in solving the case. Neighbors and local media, including Believe AFF 48 News, reported on the arrest, highlighting the tragic end of a troubled relationship. The community was shocked that someone as well-known as Darla could commit such a crime. The arrest of Darla Green marked a significant breakthrough in the investigation. The detectives felt a sense of closure, knowing they had brought Michael's killer to justice. However, the pain of his loss remained for his family and friends, who had to come to terms with the tragic events. The trial of Darla Green began on June 12, 2016, at the Madison County Courthouse. The case had garnered significant media attention, with local news outlets covering every development. The courtroom was packed with reporters, family members, and curious onlookers. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Oliver Leeson, a 45-year-old with a reputation for being tough and thorough. In his opening statement, Leeson laid out the evidence against Darla. He highlighted the diary entries that detailed her escalating paranoia, the hidden camera recordings that captured her confrontations with Michael, and the physical evidence from the crime scene. Leeson argued that Darla's jealousy and obsession drove her to murder Michael in a fit of rage. The defense attorney, Lisa Roberts, was a 38-year-old known for her calm demeanor and sharp legal mind. She argued that Darla was not in her right mind at the time of the murder due to the effects of steroids and emotional stress. Roberts claimed that Darla's actions were not premeditated but the result of a temporary lapse in judgment caused by her mental state. Throughout the trial, Michael's family sat in the front row, their faces a mix of sorrow and anger. They listened intently as witnesses, including neighbors and Michael's friends, testified about the turbulent relationship between Michael and Darla. Daniel Harris's testimony about his secret relationship with Michael added a layer of complexity to the case, revealing the depth of Darla's jealousy. The jury deliberated for 3 days before reaching a verdict. On June 28, 2016, the foreman announced that Darla Green was found guilty of second-degree murder. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the verdict. Michael's family hugged each other, tears streaming down their faces. They felt a sense of justice but were still grieving their loss. During the sentencing phase, the prosecution argued for a severe punishment, emphasizing the brutality of the crime and the impact on Michael's loved ones. The defense pleaded for leniency, citing Darla's mental health issues and lack of prior criminal history. In the end, the judge sentenced Darla to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence was met with mixed reactions. Michael's family felt it was a fair punishment, while some of Darla's supporters believed it was too harsh, considering her mental state. The community was divided, with debates about the influence of steroids on behavior and the responsibilities of those who used them. The trial's conclusion brought some closure to Michael's family, but the emotional scars remained. They had to learn to live without him, holding on to the memories of the kind and gentle man they had lost. After the trial, life slowly began to move on for everyone involved. Michael Foster's family struggled with their loss, but they found solace in their memories of him. His parents, David and Linda Foster, started a charity in Michael's name, the Foster Animal Foundation, to support animal shelters in Huntsville. This helped them feel connected to Michael's passion for animals and gave them a sense of purpose. Daniel Harris, Michael's best friend and coworker, faced a difficult time. The revelation of his secret relationship with Michael had shocked many, but he received support from friends and colleagues. Daniel continued working at Happy Paws, the dog kennel Michael had started, determined to keep Michael's dream alive. He also sought therapy to help him cope with the trauma and grief. Rosabeth Green, Darla's mother and Michael's ex-girlfriend, also found the aftermath challenging. As a high school science teacher, she focused on her students, finding some distraction in her work. She remained in touch with Michael's family, sharing their sorrow and supporting their charity efforts. The ordeal brought her closer to them, creating a bond of shared grief. Darla Green's YouTube channel, once filled with workout videos and health tips, was abandoned. Her followers were shocked by the news of her crime. In prison, Darla participated in mental health programs and anger management classes. She spent her time reflecting on. Michael's friends and family held an annual memorial at Happy Paws on his birthday, celebrating his life and love for animals. This gathering became a tradition, a way for everyone to remember Michael and find comfort in each other's company. The trial and its aftermath had left a mark on everyone involved. They had all been touched by Michael's kindness and the tragedy of his untimely death. Through their efforts to honor his memory and support each other, they found a way to heal and move forward. Louis Torino was 45 years old and worked as a financial advisor. He was very good at his job, known for being meticulous and charming. Louis lived in Providence, Rhode Island, with his wife, Sarah Torino, who was 44 years old. Sarah was an elementary school teacher, loved by her students and fellow teachers for her caring and kind personality. The Torinos were well known in their neighborhood and often hosted social gatherings. Louis and Sarah were a loving couple, and their friends admired how close they were. They had 2 children, including their 18-year-old daughter, Bethel Torino. Bethel was a smart and independent college student studying psychology at a local community college. She was very close to her parents and spent a lot of time with them. The Torinos had recently decided to try something new in their marriage. They wanted to spice up their relationship and decided to explore the swinging lifestyle, which includes wife swapping. This was a big decision for them, and they were both excited and nervous about it. They started to get involved with other couples in the community who were also interested in swinging. Just a few days before their deaths, Louis and Sarah were busy planning their next sex meeting. They were going to meet up with their close friends, Jack and Beth Kana. The Connaughts were also into swinging and had swapped partners several times with the Torinos before. The Torinos were looking forward to the event and were talking about it a lot. Louis and Sarah both had dreams for the future. Louis wanted to retire early and travel the world with Sarah. He often talked about visiting places like Paris, Rome, and Tokyo. Sarah dreamed of writing the children's book one day that would tell kids in a child-appropriate way of the swinging lifestyle. She loved working with kids and wanted to continue teaching for a few more years before focusing on her writing. In the days leading up to their tragic deaths, the Torinos were happy and full of life. They were excited about their new lifestyle and the upcoming gathering with the Connaughts. They spent time together, talking about their dreams and plans for the future. Louis and Sarah were a couple who loved life and each other, but their story took a dark turn that no one could have predicted. On January 9, 2019, at 8:30 a.m., Maria Lopez, the Torino family's housekeeper, arrived at their home in Providence, Rhode Island, to start her usual morning routine. Maria had worked for the Torinos for several years and was very close to the family. She greeted their cat, Marco Stefanovic, at the door as usual and began tidying up the living room. As Maria made her way upstairs to clean the bedrooms, she noticed something unusual. The door to Louis and Sarah's bedroom was slightly ajar, which was not typical. Feeling a bit uneasy, she knocked gently and called out their names. There was no response. Maria pushed the door open and was met with a horrifying sight. Louis and Sarah Torino were lying naked on their bed, brutally stabbed to death. Their faces were mutilated beyond recognition, and the sheets were soaked in blood. Maria gasped in shock and stumbled back, her heart racing. She quickly pulled out her cell phone and dialed 911, her hands trembling. The 911 operator answered, and Maria struggled to find her voice. "Help, please. They is dead. Mucho sangre," she cried. The operator tried to calm her down and asked for the address. Maria gave the address and explained that the victims were her employers, Louis and Sarah Torino. While waiting for the police to arrive, Maria ran downstairs and out of the house, unable to bear the sight of the crime scene. She stood in the driveway, shaking and crying. Neighbors, seeing her distress, came over to ask what was wrong, and she told them about the horrible discovery. At 8:45 a.m., the first police officers arrived at the Torino residence. They quickly secured the scene and began their investigation. They spoke with Maria, who was still visibly shaken. She described finding the bodies and her immediate reaction. They gently reassured her and thanked her for her help. The police then escorted Maria to a neighbor's house to rest and recover from the shock. The news of the murders spread quickly. Local media outlets, including the Providence Journal and TV stations like WBRI and NBC10, covered the story extensively. People in the community were horrified, saddened, and mystified by the tragic deaths of Louis and Sarah Torino. On January 9, 2019, at 8:45 a.m., the Providence police arrived at the Torino residence. The first responders quickly secured the area and called in the detectives. Detective Mark Simmons and his partner, Detective Lisa Chen, were on the scene within minutes. They were known for their dedication and thorough approach to solving crimes. The detectives entered the house and were immediately struck by the gruesome scene in the bedroom. Louis and Sarah Torino lay naked on the bed, their bodies brutally stabbed and their faces mutilated beyond recognition. Blood was everywhere, on the bed, the walls, and the floor. It was clear that this was a crime of extreme passion and rage. Detective Simmons, a tall man with a calm demeanor, took charge of the investigation. He ordered the forensic team to start collecting evidence. Detective Chen, known for her keen eye for detail, began photographing the crime scene from every angle. The room was chaotic, with signs of a violent struggle. The detectives carefully examined the area around the bed. They found the murder weapon, a bloody kitchen knife, on the floor near Lewis' side of the bed. They bagged it as evidence, hoping it would provide crucial clues. The team also collected fingerprints from various surfaces and swabbed for DNA samples. Outside, the media had gathered, with reporters from the Providence Journal and local TV stations like WPRI and NBC 10 covering the story. The detectives knew they had to work quickly to provide answers to a shocked and grieving community. Neighbors were questioned about anything they might have seen or heard. Most of them described the Torinos as a friendly and happy couple who often hosted gatherings. No one could believe something so terrible had happened to them. The forensic team used advanced tools to gather evidence. They used luminol to detect traces of blood that might not be visible to the naked eye. They also scanned for any hair or fibers that could link a suspect to the crime scene. Detective Simmons and Detective Chin interviewed Maria Lopez, the housekeeper who had discovered the bodies. Maria, still in shock, recounted her morning routine and her horror upon finding the Torinos. She provided as much detail as she could, despite her distress. The police worked tirelessly throughout the day and night, piecing together the events that led to the murders. They knew this case would require all their skills and resources to solve. The detectives remained focused, determined to bring justice to Louis and Sarah Torino. The first suspect the police investigated was Jack Conant, a 47-year-old bar owner. Jack was known in Providence for running a popular local bar called Jack's Place, which was frequented by many in the community. He was married to Beth Conant, and the couple was known to participate as self-described experts in the swinging lifestyle. Jack's friends described him as quiet and reserved, often keeping to himself. Despite his calm exterior, he was known to be somewhat introverted and prone to jealousy. Jack and Beth had agreed to swap partners with the Torinos, making Jack a key person of interest in the investigation. On the night of the murders, Jack had been at his bar. The police interviewed him there on January 10, 2019, the day after the bodies were found. Jack's demeanor during the interrogation was calm, but there was a noticeable tension in his voice. Detective Simmons and Detective Chen questioned Jack about his relationship with the Torinos and his whereabouts on the night of January 8, 2019. Jack explained that he had been at his bar all night, a statement that his employees later corroborated. Surveillance footage from Jack's place confirmed his presence there until closing time, around 2:00 a.m. Despite his alibi, the detectives pressed Jack about his feelings towards the Torinos. They wanted to know if there had been any recent conflicts or tensions, especially given the intimate nature of their relationships. Jack admitted that he sometimes felt jealous of all the sex Beth was having with other people, but he denied any ill will towards Louis and Sarah. The detectives also asked Jack if he had noticed any unusual behavior from Beth or if she had mentioned any plans to meet with the Torinos. Jack insisted that he had no idea anything was wrong and that Beth had not mentioned anything out of the ordinary. Throughout the interrogation, Jack remained composed but visibly anxious. He repeatedly asserted his innocence and expressed shock and sadness over the Torinos' deaths. The detectives noted his reactions and body language, looking for any signs of deceit. While Jack's alibi seemed solid, the police continued to scrutinize his actions and statements. They knew that in cases like this, even the smallest detail could be crucial. As the investigation progressed, the detectives remained cautious, keeping all possibilities open while they gathered more evidence and interviewed other suspects. The second suspect in the investigation was Beth Conant, a 40-year-old professor of shamanism at the Rhode Island School of Design. Beth was known for her outgoing and persuasive nature. She was the more dominant partner in our marriage to Jack and was very interested in the swinging lifestyle, including swapping partners with both men and women. Beth was often the life of the party, charismatic and charming, but she also had a powerful and controlling nature which had caused tension in our marriage. The police brought Beth in for questioning on January 11, 2019, 2 days after the discovery of the bodies. Detective Simmons and Detective Chin led the interrogation, asking Beth about her relationship with the Torinos and her activities on the night of the murders. Beth admitted that she and Jack had an open relationship and had swapped partners with the Torinos several times. Beth's alibi for the night of January 8, 2019 was that she was home alone, reading and grading papers. She seemed confident but defensive during the questioning. The detectives pressed her on her feelings towards the Torinos, especially considering her attraction to their 18-year-old daughter, Bethel, something Jack had told him about. Beth did not deny her attraction, admitting she found Bethel very attractive, saying she had the hottest body on the face of the earth. but insisted she would never harm Lewis and Sarah. Beth's demeanor during the interrogation was cooperative yet guarded. She explained that her relationship with the Torinos was consensual and that there were no recent conflicts or issues. Despite her confident front, the detectives noticed moments of nervousness, particularly when discussing her attraction to Bethel. The detectives also asked about any tensions or problems in her marriage with Jack. Beth acknowledged that her lifestyle of unlimited sexual freedom sometimes made her husband jealousy, but she downplayed it, saying they had always worked through their issues through shamanistic rituals she had learned. She firmly denied any involvement in the murders, expressing shock and sadness at the loss of her friends. Throughout the interrogation, Beth maintained her innocence, but the detectives remained skeptical. Her alibi was weak, with no witnesses to confirm her whereabouts on the night of the murders. The police continued to gather evidence and scrutinize her statements, knowing that her strong personality and complex relationships could be key to understanding the motive behind the crime. As the investigation progressed, Beth's role in the case remained a critical focus. The detectives knew they needed more evidence to determine her involvement and continued to delve into her past and her interactions with the Torinos, hoping to uncover the truth. The third suspect in the investigation was Bethel Torino, the 18-year-old daughter of Lewis and Sarah Torino. Bethel was a college student majoring in psychology at a local community college. She was known to be intelligent and independent, and she had always been very close to her parents. However, she had become increasingly disturbed by their growing interest in the swinging lifestyle. The police brought Bethel in for questioning on January 12, 2019. Detective Simmons and Detective Chin led the interrogation, asking Bethel about her relationship with her parents and her feelings about their new lifestyle. Bethel explained that she had initially tried to be supportive, but she had become horrified when her parents expressed interest in involving her to please Beth Conant, who was sexually attracted to her. Bethel's demeanor during the questioning was a mix of anger and sadness. She spoke about feeling betrayed and dehumanized by her parents' intentions, even showing the police a spreadsheet her father had made to show her ways to sexually satisfy Beth during their planned encounter. She admitted to having arguments with them about their lifestyle, but she firmly denied any involvement in their deaths. The detectives noted her emotional responses, seeing the young woman who was deeply hurt by her parents' actions. The detectives also questioned Bethel about her whereabouts on the night of January 8, 2019. Bethel stated that she had been studying at the local library until it closed at 10:00 p.m., after which she went home and went to bed. Her alibi was partially confirmed by library staff, who remembered seeing her there, but there were no witnesses to verify her activities after she left. As the interrogation continued, the detectives probed Bethel's relationships with the Conants. Bethel expressed strong dislike for Beth Conant, describing her as manipulative and overbearing. She recounted a recent incident where Beth had walked in on her in the bathroom and started taking off her clothes, asking her, "Am I beautiful enough for you?" Something which Bethel felt very uncomfortable and angry. Bethel's emotions ran high during the questioning, but she consistently maintained her innocence. She spoke about her dreams of becoming a psychologist and helping others, a stark contrast to the violent crime she was being questioned about. Despite her strong denials, the detectives remained cautious, knowing that strong emotions and family tensions could be a powerful motive. The investigation into Bethel continued, with the detectives carefully analyzing her statements and looking for any inconsistencies. They knew that understanding her true feelings and actions was crucial to solving the case. Bethel's role in the tragic events of January 8 remained uncertain, but the detectives were determined to uncover the truth. On January 20, 2019, at 9:00 a.m., Detective Lisa Chen received a call that new evidence had been found. It was a cold, snowy morning in Providence, and the detectives were eager for a break in the case. The call came from a jogger who had been running through a nearby park when he stumbled upon something unusual. Under a bush, partially covered by snow, he found a blood-stained jacket. Detectives Simmons and Chen quickly arrived at the scene. The jacket was carefully bagged and sent to the forensics lab for analysis. The detectives spoke with the jogger, who explained how he found the jacket. He seemed calm, but a bit shaken by his discovery. The detectives thanked him for his help and assured him they would follow up on this new lead. At the forensics lab, technicians worked swiftly to examine the jacket. They found traces of blood that matched the DNA of Lewis and Sarah Torino. This was a significant breakthrough. Inside one of the jacket pockets, they discovered a crumpled piece of paper. It was a receipt from a local gas station, dated January 8, 2019, at 11:30 p.m., just a few hours before the murders. Detective Chen reviewed surveillance footage from the gas station. The video showed Bethel Torino purchasing gas and snacks. This placed her out and about late on the night of the murders, casting doubt on her alibi. The detectives knew they needed to speak with Bethel again. Bethel was brought in for another round of questioning. When confronted with the evidence, her demeanor changed. She became more defensive and agitated. Bethel insisted that she had gone for a drive to clear her head and had nothing to do with the murders. However, the detectives pressed her on the details and she struggled to maintain her story. The new evidence also led the detectives to re-examine the crime scene. They found a set of footprints in the backyard that matched the soles of Bethel's boots. This further connected her to the scene on the night of the murders. Detective Simmons and Chen knew they were getting closer to the truth. As the investigation continued, the police remained focused on the evidence. They knew that every detail mattered. The jacket, the receipt, and the footprints were all pieces of a puzzle that they were determined to solve. The detectives worked tirelessly, knowing that justice for Louis and Sarah Torino depended on their efforts. On January 22, 2019 at 10:00 a.m., the police were confident they had found the murderer. After gathering crucial evidence, including the blood-stained jacket and surveillance footage, detectives believed Bethel Torino, the 18-year-old daughter of Louis and Sarah Torino, was responsible for their deaths. Bethel was an intelligent and independent young woman, studying psychology at a local community college. She had always been close to her parents, but had grown increasingly disturbed by their new interest in the swinging lifestyle. The breaking point came when she discovered their plans to please Beth Kana, who desperately wanted to have sex with her. Her father even gave her a spreadsheet showing all the methods she could use to sexually please Beth. Bethel felt disgusted, betrayed, and dehumanized, which led to a heated confrontation on the night of January 8, 2019. On that night, in a fit of rage and desperation, Bethel used a kitchen knife to brutally stab her parents while they slept naked in their bed. The scene in the bedroom showed the intensity of her anger, with their faces mutilated beyond recognition. It was a crime driven by a twisted sense of self-protection and rage. The detectives pieced together the events leading to the murders. Bethel's receipt from the gas station placed her out late at night, contradicting her alibi. Footprints matching her boots were found in the backyard, further linking her to the crime scene. Confronted with this evidence, Bethel's defensive demeanor during the second interrogation raised more suspicions. On January 23, 2019, at 8:00 a.m., the police arrived at Bethel's home to arrest her. Detective Simmons and Detective Chen led the operation. Bethel was surprised and initially resisted, but eventually she was taken into custody. The police read her rights, and she was charged with the murders of her parents. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community. The Torinos were well-liked, and the idea that their daughter was the murderer was hard for many to accept. Friends and neighbors were devastated, struggling to understand how such a tragedy could happen. The victim's family reacted with a mix of sorrow and disbelief. They had lost not only Louis and Sarah, but now faced the reality that Bethel, a beloved family member, was responsible. The arrest provided some answers, but also opened up more questions about what could have driven her to commit such a heinous act. The trial of Bethel Torino began on October 15, 2019, in the Providence Superior Court. The courtroom was packed with media, friends, and family of the victims. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney Rachel Moore, a seasoned prosecutor known for her tough demeanor and relentless pursuit of justice. Moore argued that Bethel's actions were premeditated and driven by a deep sense of betrayal and rage. Moore presented the evidence: the blood-stained jacket, the gas station receipt, and the matching footprints. She called witnesses, including the jogger who found the jacket and the forensic experts who linked the evidence to Bethel. Moore painted a picture of a young woman pushed to the edge by her parents' actions and driven to commit a brutal double murder. The defense attorney, James G. Poker, was a well-respected lawyer known for his calm and composed manner. Poker argued that Bethel was a victim of her circumstances, overwhelmed by her parents' lifestyle and their plans to involve her. He claimed that Bethel acted in a moment of temporary insanity, unable to control her actions due to extreme emotional distress. During the trial, Bethel's demeanor was somber and tearful. She showed remorse and expressed her love for her parents, saying she never meant to harm them. Her emotional testimony moved some in the courtroom, including her remaining family members, who were visibly torn between their love for Bethel and their grief for Louis and Sarah. The victim's family watched the trial with heavy hearts. They struggled with the conflicting emotions of losing loved ones and seeing another loved one on trial for the crime. The community also followed the trial closely, with many people discussing the case in local coffee shops and on social media. On November 5, 2019, the jury reached a verdict. Bethel Torino was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge, known for his fairness, sentenced her to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. The sentencing brought a mix of reactions. Some felt that justice had been served, while others believed the sentence was too harsh, considering Bethel's emotional state at the time of the crime. The verdict and sentencing had a profound effect on everyone involved. The victim's family continued to mourn their loss while grappling with the reality of Bethel's punishment. Friends and neighbors tried to find closure in the wake of such a tragic and complicated case. After the trial, life in Providence changed for everyone involved in the Torino case. The community was still reeling from the tragic events and the shocking trial. Bethel Torino, now serving her life sentence at the Rhode Island Department of Corrections, faced a challenging reality. She was housed in the maximum security unit, where she would spend at least 25 years before being eligible for parole. In prison, Bethel struggled with the weight of her actions and the isolation from her former life. She attended counseling sessions and participated in educational programs to pass the time. Her case continued to be a topic of discussion among prison reform advocates and legal analysts. Jack Cunha, Beth's husband, tried to rebuild his life after the trial. He closed Jack's place, the bar he had owned for years, as it had become a painful reminder of the past. Jack moved away from Providence and divorced Beth, deciding to start over in a different city, seeking to escape the memories of the tragedy and focus on his own healing. Beth Cunha continued her life in Rhode Island, but her reputation was forever changed by the events. She remained in the public eye due to her connection to the case, but she distanced herself from the media and the community, trying to move forward while grappling with the impact of the murders. She also took up her dear friend and sexual partner's project of making a kid's book, eventually self-publishing the finished book. Manny the monkey swings from tree to tree to muted reception in 2023. Overall, the case of the Torino family left a deep scar on Providence. The tragedy and the subsequent trial were reminders of how complex and painful human relationships can be, and how even the closest family bonds can unravel in the face of intense emotions and misunderstandings. This tragic story serves as a stark reminder of how complex human relationships can lead to unforeseen and devastating consequences. Larry Harrison was a 42-year-old man who managed a popular Applebee's in Rochester, Minnesota. He was known for being warm and friendly. Larry was a big fan of the Minnesota Vikings and loved watching their games. He lived with his wife, Lauren, and their teenage son. They had a cozy house in a quiet neighborhood where they had lived for many years. Larry's family meant everything to him. He and Lauren had been married for over 15 years. They met in college and quickly fell in love. Larry was a devoted father who always found time for his son Brian, whether it was helping with homework or coaching his little league team. Larry's friendly nature made him a well-loved figure in Rochester. He often volunteered at the local food bank and participated in community cleanup events. In the days leading up to his death, Larry was busy planning a community event at his restaurant to celebrate the end of the football season. He wanted to bring people together for a big feast, featuring everyone's favorite dishes and, of course, the game highlights. The Super Bowl had just taken place on February 1, 2015, with the New England Patriots defeating the Seattle Seahawks. Larry was excited about the event and had been working extra hours to make sure everything was perfect. Larry also had personal plans. He was looking forward to a family trip to the Mall of America, where they planned to visit the amusement park and shop at their favorite stores. Larry was a simple man who found joy in everyday moments with his family and friends. In summary, Larry Harrison was a man who cared deeply about his family, his community, and his work. He was loved by many and had a bright future ahead of him, full of dreams and plans. His untimely death was a shock to everyone who knew him, leaving a void that could never be filled. On the morning of February 8, 2015, at around 7:30 a.m., Lauren Harrison found her husband, Larry, dead in their kitchen. It was a cold and snowy day in Rochester, Minnesota. Lauren had woken up early to prepare breakfast. As she walked into the kitchen, she was met with a horrifying scene. Larry's body lay on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood. He had been stabbed multiple times. The sight was shocking and terrifying. Lauren immediately screamed for help. Her loud cries woke up the neighbors, who quickly rushed over to see what was happening. One of the neighbors, Mary Benedictus, who lived next door, ran over to check on Lauren. When she saw the gruesome scene, she quickly called 911. Mary described feeling a mix of fear and disbelief. She had known Larry for years and couldn't believe something so horrible could happen. It was like a nightmare, she later told the local news. Larry was such a kind man. I couldn't understand why anyone would do this to him. The 911 operators stayed on the phone with Mary, trying to keep her calm while emergency services were on their way. Lauren, in shock and grief, could barely speak. She kept repeating Larry's name, unable to comprehend the brutal reality before her. Within minutes, the police and paramedics arrived. The first officer on the scene noted the look of absolute horror on Lauren's face. He tried to comfort her while securing the area. Paramedics quickly assessed Larry, but it was clear that he had been dead for some time. News of Larry's death spread quickly through the small town. Local media, including the Rochester Post-Bulletin, reported the shocking incident. Neighbors and friends gathered outside the Harrison home, exchanging whispers and offering support to Lauren and her son. The local community, which had been buzzing with post-Super Bowl excitement just a week earlier, was now in a state of shock and mourning. The discovery of Larry Harrison's body marked the beginning of a tragic and complex investigation, one that would reveal dark secrets and shake the community to its core. The Rochester Police Department arrived quickly at the Harrison home on the morning of February 8, 2015. They secured the area and tried to comfort a shocked and distraught Lauren Harrison. The paramedics soon arrived and confirmed that Larry Harrison was dead. Detective Jonathan Gustafson, a veteran with over 20 years on the force, and Detective Sarah Brown, known for her sharp instincts, were assigned to lead the investigation. They arrived shortly after the initial officers. Detective Gustafson was known for his methodical approach, while Detective Brown had a keen eye for detail. The crime scene in the kitchen was gruesome. Blood was everywhere, on the floor, on the countertops, and even splattered on the walls. Larry had been stabbed multiple times, indicating a violent struggle. The detectives noted that there were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Larry might have known his attacker. Detectives Gustafson and Brown started their investigation by examining the body. Larry had defensive wounds on his arms, which meant he tried to fight off his attacker. The detectives then began to collect evidence. They took fingerprints, blood samples, and photographs of the scene. They'd also collected the knife used in the attack, which was found near Larry's body. Forensic experts were called in to help analyze the evidence. They used tools like luminol to detect any hidden bloodstains and UV lights to find any traces of bodily fluids. They also used a technique called bloodstain pattern analysis to understand how the attack happened. This helped them piece together the events leading up to Larry's death. The detectives interviewed Lauren, who was still in shock. She couldn't provide much information at first, but she did mention hearing a noise in the kitchen during the night. The police also talked to the neighbors, including Mary Benedictus, who had called 911. Mary didn't see or hear anything unusual that night, which added to the mystery. The local media, including the Rochester Post-Bulletin, covered the story extensively. The community was in shock. Everyone wanted to know who could have done such a horrible thing to Larry, a well-loved and respected member of their town. The police set up a tip line, hoping someone might come forward with information. As the investigation progressed, the detectives knew they had to act quickly. The evidence pointed to someone close to Larry, but they needed more proof to make an arrest. The crime scene was just the beginning of a complicated and heartbreaking case. The first person the police investigated was Lauren Harrison, Larry's wife. Lauren was 38 years old and worked as a nurse at the local Mayo Clinic. She was known for her caring nature, but the detectives had to look closely at everyone connected to Larry. Lauren had been married to Larry for over 15 years. On the surface, they seemed like a happy couple, but the investigation revealed some troubling secrets. Lauren was having sex with Garmin Wilson, her 18-year-old son's best friend. This affair put a strain on her marriage and made her a suspect in Larry's murder. Detectives Gustafson and Brown brought Lauren in for questioning. The interview took place at the Rochester Police Department. Lauren appeared nervous and upset, which was understandable given the circumstances. The detectives asked her about her relationship with Larry and if there were any problems in their marriage. Lauren admitted to the affair with Garmin, but insisted she still loved Larry and would never hurt him. The detectives pressed Lauren about her whereabouts on the night of the murder. She claimed she was at home, asleep, and didn't hear anything unusual until she found Larry's body the next morning. The detectives noted her emotional responses, which seemed genuine, but they couldn't rule her out as a suspect just yet. They also asked Lauren about any arguments she and Larry might have had recently. She mentioned that they had been fighting about her affair, but she denied that these arguments ever got physical. Lauren's responses were consistent, but the detectives needed more evidence to determine her involvement in Larry's death. Throughout the investigation, Lauren maintained her innocence. She was cooperative but clearly devastated by Larry's death. Her emotions ranged from sadness to anger as she tried to come to terms with what had happened. The detectives had to consider every possibility, but Lauren's cooperation and the lack of direct evidence against her made it difficult to build a strong case. The police also looked into Lauren's phone records and financial statements. They found no suspicious activity that could link her directly to the murder. However, the affair with Garmin Wilson remained a significant point of interest. The detectives decided to bring Garmin in for questioning as well, hoping he might shed more light on the situation. As the police continued to investigate, they realized they needed to look at other potential suspects. Lauren's affair was a crucial piece of the puzzle, but it didn't provide all the answers. The detectives knew they had to keep digging to find the truth behind Larry Harrison's tragic death. With the discovery of Lauren's affair, the police turned their attention to Garmin Wilson, the 18-year-old best friend of Larry's son and Lauren's secret lover. Garmin was a high school senior and part-time mechanic. He was well-liked and charismatic, but his relationship with Lauren put him in a complicated situation. Detectives Gustafson and Brown brought Garmin in for questioning on February 9, 2015. The interview took place at the Rochester Police Department. Garmin appeared nervous but cooperative. The detectives asked him about his relationship with Lauren and how it might have affected Larry. Garmin admitted to having sex with Lauren, saying it started a few months ago. He insisted that he had no problems with Larry and that Larry never knew about the affair. Garmin claimed he had been home on the night of the murder, working on a car in his garage. His alibi seemed plausible, but the detectives needed to verify it. The police also questioned Garmin about his feelings toward Larry. Garmin described Larry as a father figure and said he admired him. He was adamant that he had no reason to harm Larry and was deeply saddened by his death. Garmin's emotions appeared genuine, but the detectives couldn't ignore the affair and its potential impact. To check Garmin's alibi, the detectives visited his home and garage. They found the car he claimed to have been working on and interviewed his parents, who confirmed that Garmin was home that night. The alibi held up, but the detectives remained cautious. Detectives Gustafson and Brown also looked into Garmin's phone records and social media. They found many graphic sexts and naked pictures sent between Garmin and Lauren, but nothing that suggested Garmin was involved in the murder. The text showed a sexual relationship, but there were no threats or plans to harm Larry. Garmin's responses during the interrogation were calm and consistent. He showed genuine concern for Lauren and her son, and his cooperation with the police helped his case. However, the detectives still considered him a suspect due to his close relationship with Lauren and the potential motive stemming from the affair. The investigation into Garmin revealed no direct evidence linking him to Larry's murder. His alibi and the lack of incriminating messages made it difficult for the police to build a case against him. While Garmin remained a person of interest, the detectives knew they needed more concrete evidence to either confirm or clear his involvement. As the police continued their investigation, they realized Garmin's involvement in the affair complicated the case, but it also highlighted the tangled relationships within the Harrison household. On February 10, 2015, just 2 days after Larry Harrison's murder, a heavy snowstorm hit Rochester, Minnesota. Despite the harsh weather, the police continued their investigation. That afternoon, Detective Sarah Brown discovered a crucial piece of evidence in an unexpected place. While searching through the house again, Detective Brown decided to take a closer look in the bedroom of Margaret Smith, Lauren's mother. Margaret, 64, lived with the Harrison family and had a history of mental health issues. Detective Brown found a series of hidden letters in Margaret's room. These letters were shocking and disturbing. The letters were addressed to Larry and were sexually explicit. They revealed that Margaret had a deep, unhealthy obsession with her son-in-law. She believed Larry was the reincarnation of her late husband, Edgar. This discovery changed the direction of the investigation dramatically. Detectives Brown and Gustafson immediately focused their attention on Margaret. They were stunned by the content of the letters. It was clear that Margaret's feelings for Larry were far from normal. The detectives also found that Margaret had recently stopped taking her medication for schizophrenia because she felt the drugs gave her tardive dyskinesia. a neurological disorder characterized by involuntary, repetitive movements, often resulting from long-term use of certain antipsychotic medications. The police interviewed Lauren again, this time asking about her mother. Lauren admitted that Margaret had always been very controlling and a little off. Margaret's mental health issues made her behavior unpredictable. Lauren was shocked to learn about the letters and the extent of her mother's obsession with Larry. Forensic experts analyzed the letters and confirmed they were written by Margaret. The police also looked into Margaret's medical records and found she had stopped taking her medication about a month before Larry's murder. This information suggested that Margaret's mental state might have played a role in the crime. The discovery of the letters was a turning point in the case. It provided the detectives with a new motive and a deeper understanding of the dynamics within the Harrison household. The investigation was far from over, but the police were getting closer to uncovering the truth about who killed Larry Harrison. The detectives now had a new prime suspect. Margaret's obsession with Larry, combined with her mental health issues, made her a likely candidate for the murder. However, they needed more evidence to make an arrest. As the investigation continued, the police turned their attention back to Margaret Smith, Larry's 64-year-old mother-in-law. Margaret lived with the Harrison family and had a history of mental health issues, including schizophrenia. She was taking medication that caused tardive dyskinesia, a condition that made her movements erratic. Detectives Gustafson and Brown brought Margaret in for a more thorough interrogation on February 12, 2015. Margaret was initially calm, but became defensive when asked about the sexually explicit letters she had written to Larry. She admitted to writing the letters, but claimed they were harmless expressions of her feelings. The detectives questioned Margaret about her relationship with Larry. She described him as a kind and caring man, but her obsession with him was clear. Margaret believed Larry was the reincarnation of her late husband, Edgar. This belief had driven her to write the letters and behave in a controlling manner toward her daughter, Lauren. Margaret's mental health issues were a significant factor in the investigation. The detectives learned that she had stopped taking her medication about a month before Larry's murder. This information suggested that Margaret's mental state might have played a role in the crime. The detectives also asked Margaret about her movements on the night of the murder. She claimed she was in her room with old episodes of gun smoke and didn't hear anything unusual. However, her inconsistent responses and the disturbing content of the letters made the detectives suspicious. Forensic experts analyzed the knife used in the murder and found traces of Margaret's fingerprints. This evidence, combined with the letters and her erratic behavior, made her a strong suspect. The detectives also found that Margaret had a motive: her sexual obsession for Larry and her desire to keep control over Lauren and her grandson. Margaret's reactions during the interrogation ranged from calm to agitated. She insisted that she loved Larry and would never hurt him, but her responses were often confusing and contradictory. The detectives noted her unstable behavior and continued to press her for details. The investigation revealed that Margaret's mental health issues and obsession with Larry had created a dangerous situation. The combination of her stopping her medication and her irrational beliefs about Larry pointed to a possible motive for the murder. As the police gathered more evidence, they realized they needed to consider all angles. Margaret's mental state and her history of erratic behavior were crucial pieces of the puzzle. The detectives knew they had to be thorough in their investigation to ensure they uncovered the truth behind Larry Harrison's tragic death. On Valentine's Day 2015, the Rochester police made a breakthrough in the case. After collecting and analyzing all the evidence, they identified Margaret Smith, Larry's 64-year-old mother-in-law, as the murderer. Margaret, who lived with the Harrison family, had a long history of mental health issues. Her obsession with Larry and her deteriorating mental state had led to a tragic outcome. The police pieced together what happened on the night of the murder. Margaret had confronted Larry in the kitchen, cruelly demanding that he have sex with her. When Larry loudly refused, Margaret's obsession turned violent. She grabbed a kitchen knife and, in a fit of rage, stabbed Larry multiple times. The attack was frenzied, and Larry had tried to defend himself, but he couldn't escape. Detectives Gustafson and Brown, along with a team of officers, went to the Harrison home to arrest Margaret. It was early in the morning, around 6:00 a.m., when they arrived. Margaret was in her room, and when the police informed her of the charges, she initially appeared confused and then became hysterical. She kept screaming this Valentine's Day, "I give my heart to you, Larry," and claimed that Larry's death was an accident caused by her tardive dyskinesia, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. The arrest shocked the entire Harrison family. Lauren and her son were devastated. They couldn't believe that Margaret, their mother and grandmother, could commit such a horrible act. The neighbors, who had always seen Margaret as a frail and eccentric old lady, were equally stunned. The community was in disbelief as news of the arrest spread. Lauren and her son struggled to come to terms with the revelation. They were torn between their grief for Larry and their disbelief about Margaret's actions. The arrest brought some closure to the case, but left the family in deep emotional turmoil. The police took Margaret into custody, and she was booked at the local jail. During the booking process, Margaret remained erratic and often incoherent. The police ensured that she received medical attention for her mental health issues, but her legal troubles were just beginning. The community, still reeling from Larry's murder, had mixed reactions. Some were relieved that the police had found the killer, while others were saddened by the tragic circumstances that led to the crime. The local media, including the Rochester Post-Bulletin, covered the arrest extensively, adding to the public's shock and sorrow. The arrest of Margaret Smith marked a significant turning point in the investigation. The police had successfully identified and apprehended the murderer, but the road to justice was far from over. The next step would be the trial, where the full extent of Margaret's actions and the impact on the Harrison family would be revealed. Margaret Smith's trial began on April 20, 2016, at the Olmsted County Courthouse. The courtroom was packed with members of the community, including Larry Harrison's family and friends. The trial attracted significant media attention, with local news outlets like the Rochester Post-Bulletin providing daily updates. The prosecutor, David Benedictus, 45, was known for his tough approach. He argued that Margaret's obsession with Larry and her decision to stop taking her medication led to the brutal murder. Benedictus presented the love letters as evidence of Margaret's unhealthy fixation and called on forensic experts to explain how the fingerprints on the knife matched Margaret's. Margaret's defense attorney, Linda Lou Green, 50, had a reputation for taking on challenging cases. She argued that Margaret's mental health issues and the side effects of her medication, including tardive dyskinesia, played a significant role in the incident. Green tried to convince the jury that the murder was not premeditated but a tragic accident. Throughout the trial, Larry's family was visibly emotional. Lauren Harrison and her son attended every day, struggling to process the loss of Larry and the betrayal by Margaret. The courtroom atmosphere was tense as each side presented its case. The jury deliberated for 2 days before reaching a verdict. On May 5, 2016, they found Margaret Smith guilty of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced her to 25 years in prison, considering her mental health issues but also acknowledging the severity of her crime. The verdict brought a sense of closure but also a deep sadness for Larry's family. Lauren expressed relief that justice had been served but was heartbroken over the loss of her husband and the actions of her mother. The community had mixed reactions, with some feeling the sentence was fair while others thought it was too lenient or too harsh. Margaret's reaction to the verdict was one of shock. She maintained that she never meant to kill Larry and claimed the murder was an accident. Her erratic behavior continued, and she was transferred to a facility where she could receive mental health treatment while serving her sentence. The prosecution's argument was strong, highlighting Margaret's obsession and the premeditated nature of the murder. David Benedictus was praised for his thorough work in securing the conviction. On the other hand, Linda Lou Green's defense was seen as compassionate but ultimately unconvincing to the jury. The trial's conclusion marked the end of a painful chapter for the Harrison family. Friends and neighbors offered their support, trying to help Lauren and her son move forward. The verdict and sentencing were widely covered by the media, bringing attention to the complexities of mental health in criminal cases. The impact of Larry Harrison's murder and the trial of Margaret Smith would be felt in Rochester for years to come. The community, while relieved that justice was served, remained deeply affected by the tragic events that unfolded in February 2015. After Margaret Smith's trial and sentencing, life slowly began to return to a new normal for the Harrison family and those involved in the case. For Lauren Harrison and her son, the aftermath of Larry's murder was a difficult journey of grief and healing. They received support from friends, neighbors, and the community who rallied around them during this challenging time. Lauren decided to move out of the house where the tragic event occurred. With the help of close friends and local volunteers, she found a new home in a quieter neighborhood of Rochester. She wanted to create a fresh start for herself and her son, away from the painful memories of their old house. In the months following the trial, Lauren focused on rebuilding her life. She returned to work at the Mayo Clinic, where she received support from colleagues and patients alike. Lauren's strength and resilience inspired many in the community who admired her courage in the face of adversity. Larry's colleagues at the local Applebee's where he worked also honored his memory. They organized a memorial service in March 2015, inviting friends, customers, and community members to celebrate Larry's life. The event featured heartfelt speeches, music, and a slideshow of photos showcasing Larry's dedication to his work and his love for his family. Meanwhile, Margaret Smith began serving her sentence at a state correctional facility. She received ongoing mental health treatment to manage her condition and the effects of her medication. Despite her tepid attempts to ask forgiveness for what she did, Margaret eventually succumbed to COVID-19 in May of 2021 and was buried without a gravestone in the jailhouse cemetery. The Rochester community, though deeply affected by the events of February 2015, came together to support each other. Local organizations offered counseling services and support groups for those affected by violent crimes. The media continued to follow the aftermath of the case, highlighting the importance of mental health awareness and support for families dealing with loss. As time passed, Lauren Harrison and her son found ways to remember Larry's kindness and generosity. They visited his favorite places in Rochester and shared memories with friends and family. While the pain of losing Larry would always be with them, they focused on honoring his legacy and finding hope in the future. The impact of Larry Harrison's murder resonated throughout Rochester, reminding everyone of the fragility of life and the importance of community support. The Harrison family's journey through grief and healing served as a testament to the strength of the human spirit in the face of tragedy. Rebecca Becky Frederickson was a 31-year-old woman living in San Antonio, Texas. She was known throughout her community for her warm personality and her incredible talent for baking. Becky owned and operated Sweet Treats, a popular local bakery that had become a staple in the neighborhood. Her shop was known for its delicious pastries, especially her famous chocolate chip cookies and pumpkin spice muffins, a trendy treat beloved by millennials everywhere. Becky had a loyal customer base, many of whom had been coming to her bakery since it first opened. Becky was married to Michael Frederickson, a 35-year-old financial advisor. They had been married for 5 years after meeting at a friend's wedding, and on the surface, their life seemed perfect. They lived in a cozy one-story home not far from the bakery and were well-liked in the community, with Becky often donating cakes and other baked goods to local schools and events, like the annual San Antonio Christmas Parade. However, in the months leading up to her death, Becky had been feeling a growing sense of unease. She noticed that Michael had become distant, often coming home late from work and showing little interest in their marriage even after Becky, who had always dreamed of starting a family, was diagnosed with endometriosis, which made it difficult for her to conceive. Despite these challenges, Becky remained hopeful. She threw herself into her work, often staying late at the bakery to perfect new recipes. In September 2019, Becky was preparing for the busy holiday season. She had just begun planning the bakery's Halloween-themed treats, which were always a big hit with customers. But even as she focused on her business, Becky couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong in her personal life. She tried to talk to Michael about her concerns, but he always brushed them off, leaving Becky to wonder what was really going on. Becky's friends and customers described her as sweet, generous, and hardworking. She was the kind of person who would go out of her way to help others, and her warm smile was a welcome sight to everyone who knew her. Her death would leave a void in the community that would be hard to fill. On September 15, 2019, at approximately 7:30 a.m., the lifeless body of Rebecca Becky Frederickson was discovered in the kitchen of her San Antonio home. It was a warm Sunday morning, and the city was just starting to wake up. Becky's neighbor, Karen Simmons, a 56-year-old retired school teacher, was the one who found her. Karen had noticed that Becky's bakery, Sweet Treats, hadn't opened on time that morning. This was unusual. Becky's bakery was almost always bustling with customers eager for her famous cookies and cakes. Concerned, Karen decided to check on Becky. She walked the short distance to Becky's home, which was just around the corner from the bakery. When she arrived, she found the front door slightly ajar, which immediately set off alarm bells. Becky was always careful about locking up, especially after a few break-ins had been reported in the neighborhood earlier that year. Karen hesitated, but then pushed the door open and called out Becky's name. There was no answer. She stepped inside and noticed a strange silence. The house was neat and tidy, except for the kitchen. As Karen entered the kitchen, her heart sank. Becky was lying on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood. The rolling pin, which Becky always kept on the kitchen counter, was on the floor beside her, stained with blood. The sight was horrifying. The once warm and welcoming kitchen, where Becky had baked so many treats, was now a crime scene. Karen was in shock but managed to dial 911. Her hands trembled as she gave the dispatcher the address and explained what she had found. She stayed on the line until the police arrived, all the while trying to hold back tears. Karen later told investigators that Becky's face was so badly injured that she could hardly recognize her. When the police arrived, they found Karen standing outside, visibly shaken and in tears. She could barely speak, and the officers had to help her to a nearby bench to sit down. The neighborhood quickly buzzed with news of Becky's death, leaving everyone in disbelief. How could such a kind and gentle woman meet such a violent end? When the San Antonio Police Department received the 911 call on September 15, 2019, officers arrived at the scene within minutes. The responding officers were Surgeon Maria Diaz, a 42-year-old veteran with a reputation for being thorough and compassionate, and Officer James O'Meal, a 28-year-old who had only been on the force for 3 years, but was eager to learn. They quickly secured the area, setting up yellow crime scene tape around Becky Frederickson's small single-story home. The quiet neighborhood, typically filled with the scent of fresh pastries from Becky's bakery, was now overtaken by the flashing lights of police cars and the hum of emergency radios. As they entered the house, the officers were struck by the eerie silence. The living room was untouched, with cozy furniture and framed photos of Becky's wedding day displayed on the walls. But as they approached the kitchen, the scene changed dramatically. The kitchen, once a place of warmth and comfort, was now a gruesome crime scene. Becky's body lay in the center of the room. Her blood spattered the white-tiled floor, and the rolling pin, a symbol of her love for baking, was lying nearby, covered in blood. Surgeon Diaz's experience kicked in as she began to assess the situation. The scene indicated a violent struggle. Chairs were knocked over, and a mixing bowl had fallen to the floor, its contents spilled out. Becky's apron was stained with blood, and her hands showed defensive wounds, suggesting she had fought hard for her life. Officer O'Meal took photos of the scene while Diaz carefully noted the details. The forensic team arrived soon after, led by the team collected fingerprints, blood samples, and any other evidence that might help piece together what had happened. The medical examiner, Dr. Lillian Pang, a no-nonsense 55-year-old with decades of experience, arrived to examine the body. She noted that Becky had suffered multiple blunt force injuries to her head, and the time of death was estimated to be between 10 p.m. and midnight the previous evening. The brutality of the attack shocked everyone present, including the seasoned investigators. Outside, the news of Becky's death spread quickly. Neighbors gathered, whispering in disbelief. Many of them knew Becky personally, having bought her baked goods for years. The sight of police cars and the knowledge of what had happened inside the house left the community in a state of shock and mourning. As the investigation continued, the police focused on gathering every piece of evidence they could find. They knew that the crime scene held the key to solving this brutal murder. They needed to find out who could have committed such a heinous act against a beloved member of the community. The investigation into Becky Frederickson's murder quickly turned its focus on her husband, Michael Frederickson. Michael, 35, was a well-known financial advisor in San Antonio. To his clients, he was the picture of professionalism, calm, dependable, and trustworthy. They have a strong reputation in the community, often seen at networking events and charity functions. However, behind closed doors, Michaels was far from every woman's dream husband. He was completely different, angry with an insatiable sexual appetite his wife could never fulfill. He was a man of secrets, deeply unhappy with his life and marriage. In the days following Becky's death, investigators dug into Michael's personal life. They learned that the Fredericksons' marriage had been strained for quite some time. Becky's endometriosis diagnosis had not only shattered her dream of starting a family, but also placed significant strain on the sexual aspect of their relationship. Michael, who had once been an attentive and loving husband, grew distant and frustrated. He began spending more time at work and less time at home, often coming back late at night or even after unexplained absences of several days. Colleagues noticed that he seemed stressed, but Michael brushed off their concerns, saying it was just light stuff. The real shock came when police uncovered Michael's affair with Becky's own mother, Margaret Ruth Breedlove. Ruth, who had re-entered Becky's life only a few years earlier, was 48 and still possessed a charismatic charm and smoldering sexually her somewhat restrained daughter couldn't match. The affair had started as a harmless flirtation, but quickly escalated into something much more serious. Michael and Ruth had been secretly seeing each other for sex, even having sex on Becky's bed when she wasn't home. The affair shocked the investigation, painting a picture of a man caught between a troubled mother-daughter relationship and a tangled web of deceit. During his interrogation, Michael initially denied any involvement in Becky's murder. He maintained that he had been at the office late, working on a client's portfolio, and had come home to find Becky already dead. However, as detectives pressed him about his secret sexual relationship with Ruth, Michael's calm demeanor began to crack. He became defensive, insisting that the affair had nothing to do with Becky's death. But when detectives confronted him with evidence of his infidelity, including explicit text messages and naked pictures sent between him and Ruth, Michael's composure shattered. Police noted that Michael's behavior was suspicious, his answers were evasive, and he struggled to provide a clear timeline of his actions on the night of the murder. Investigators also found it odd that Michael showed little emotion when discussing Becky's death, often speaking about her in a detached manner as if she was just some dead person you saw on the news. Despite his attempts to distance himself from the crime, Michael's affair with Ruth provided a strong motive for murder. The pressure on Michael was mounting, and detectives were determined to get to the truth. As the investigation into Becky Frederickson's murder deepened, police turned their attention to Margaret Ruth Breedlove, Becky's 48-year-old mother. Ruth had a complicated history that raised several red flags for detectives. She had re-entered Becky's life just a few years earlier after spending decades living a free-spirited and often reckless lifestyle. Ruth had moved from Oakland, California, to San Antonio to reconnect with her daughter, but her arrival had brought more turmoil than healing. Ruth was a striking woman who had always enjoyed being the center of attention. Even in her late 40s, she maintained a youthful appearance and a sexually magnetic personality that drew people to her. After giving birth to Becky at the tender age of 17 and leaving her in the care of her own mother when Becky was just a child, Ruth had spent years drifting from one job to another and from one relationship to the next. She had worked as a house painter in Oakland, where she was known for her bold fashion choices and colorful personality. Ruth's life took a dramatic turn when she joined a cult known as the Sunshine Family in the late 1990s, a decision that led her to lose contact with Becky for nearly 2 decades. When Ruth finally resurfaced in Becky's life, it was clear that she had not changed much. She was still the same flirtatious, sexual attention-seeking woman she had always been, and she quickly became a disruptive force in Becky's marriage. Ruth openly flirted with Becky's husband, Michael, even going so far as to make out with him in front of her daughter. This behavior strained the new and already fragile relationship between mother and daughter. During her interrogation, Ruth was candid about her affair with Michael, admitting that sex she had been having with Michael was, quote, marvelous. She described the relationship as a passionate, all-consuming love affair that had given her a sense of purpose she had not felt in years. Ruth justified her actions by insisting that Michael was sexually unfulfilled in his marriage and that she was simply offering him the excitement and fulfillment he craved. To Ruth, the affair was not just a fling. It was a deep, soul-to-soul connection that she believed was meant to be. However, Ruth denied any involvement in Becky's murder. She claimed that she had been at home on the night of the killing, watching Real Housewives and sipping a glass of red wine. Her tone during the interrogation was defiant, almost as if she believed that her actions were justified. Detectives noted that Ruth showed little remorse for the affair and seemed more concerned about how the revelation of the relationship would affect her than about her daughter's death. Ruth's lack of empathy in her affair with Michael made her a strong suspect, but there was no direct evidence linking her to the crime. Despite her claims of innocence, investigators were not convinced, and they continued to scrutinize her every move. In the investigation of Becky Frederickson's murder, police also turned their attention to a third suspect, Danny La Culebra Hernandez Basco. Danny, 22, was a figure with a notorious reputation in San Antonio. Originally from Tamaulipas, Mexico, Danny had a long criminal record that included theft, assault, and drug-related charges. His nickname, La Culebra, which means the snake in English, was a reflection of his slippery, dangerous nature. Danny was known to be a rough and intimidating presence in the community. He had been spotted near Becky's bakery several times in the weeks leading up to her murder, leading to rumors that he was involved in some sort of criminal activity in the area. Witnesses reported seeing him lurking around the neighborhood, often dressed in dark clothing and keeping to the shadows. He was the kind of person who made people nervous, someone who seemed always to be on the edge of violence. When police brought Danny in for questioning, they were prepared for a difficult interrogation. Danny, however, surprised them by maintaining his innocence. He claimed he had nothing to do with Becky's murder and that he was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. According to Danny, he had been in the area to meet up with some old friends from his neighborhood who had recently immigrated to the United States, not to cause any trouble. He insisted that he had never even met Becky and had no reason to harm her. Throughout the interrogation, Danny's demeanor was defensive. He was angry and frustrated, lashing out at the detectives who questioned him. He accused them of targeting him because of his criminal past and his Mexican nationality, calling the investigation a witch hunt. Despite his protests, police remained suspicious of Danny. His violent history and proximity to the crime scene made him a person of interest. However, as the interrogation continued, it became clear that there was little evidence to tie Danny directly to Becky's murder. There were no witnesses who could place him at the scene at the time of the crime, and no physical evidence connected him to the murder. While his presence in the area was suspicious, it wasn't enough to charge him. Danny was eventually released, but police kept him under close surveillance, aware that his volatile nature and criminal background made him a potential threat. As the investigation into Becky Frederickson's murder dragged on without a clear suspect, frustration began to set in for the detectives. But on the morning of September 18, 2019, a breakthrough came when Margaret Ruth Breedlove made a shocking revelation that changed the course of the case. Ruth, during a follow-up interview with detectives, disclosed that she was pregnant, and the father was none other than her own son-in-law, Michael Frederickson. This revelation stunned the police. It added a new layer of complexity to an already tangled web of relationships. Detectives knew that this revelation could be the key to understanding the motive behind Becky's brutal murder. The news of Ruth's pregnancy was a bombshell, suggesting that the affair between Ruth and Michael wasn't just a fling, but something far more serious. With this new information in hand, the police doubled down on their investigation. They decided to re-examine the crime scene and the evidence collected earlier, hoping to uncover any overlooked details. On September 20, 2019, 2 days after Ruth's confession, detectives revisited Becky's house, where the murder had taken place. Inside, the crime scene remained eerily untouched, a stark reminder of the violence that had occurred there. The detectives carefully combed through the area, focusing on the rolling pin that had been used as the murder weapon. Forensic experts reanalyzed the rolling pin, this time looking for any traces of DNA or fingerprints that might have been missed during the initial examination. Meanwhile, detectives also turned their attention to Michael Frederickson. Armed with the knowledge of Ruth's pregnancy, they began to put together a timeline of events leading up to Becky's murder. They learned that Michael had been increasingly anxious in the weeks before the crime, reportedly distancing himself from both his wife and Ruth. He had also made several uncharacteristic mistakes at work, which coworkers later attributed to his distracted state of mind. Could he have known Ruth was pregnant with his child? And could Becky have known this shocking secret? The breakthrough came when detectives discovered a series of deleted text messages on Michael's phone, which they were able to recover with the help of digital forensic experts. These messages revealed a heated argument between Michael and Becky on the night of her death. In the texts, Becky confronted Michael about his affair with Ruth, adding the binky emoji, and Michael, in a panic, admitted to the relationship. The argument escalated quickly, and the final message from Michael suggested he was going to, quote, "F you to death." With this new evidence, the police had what they needed to tie Michael directly to the murder. The text provided a clear motive. Michael had killed Becky in a desperate attempt to escape the fallout from his affair and Ruth's pregnancy. On the evening of September 21, 2019, after uncovering the damning text messages and learning about Ruth's pregnancy, police were confident that they had enough evidence to arrest Michael Frederickson. Michael, 35, was a successful financial advisor in San Antonio, known for his calm and collected demeanor. However, beneath the surface, he was a man trapped by his own secrets and sexual desires. His affair with his mother-in-law, Ruth, and the news that she was pregnant with his child had driven him to a breaking point. The detectives decided to approach Michael at his home, a modest house in a quiet San Antonio neighborhood. They arrived just after 8 p.m. when they knew Michael would likely be home. The air was thick with tension as they knocked on the door. When Michael answered, the TV set to how-to videos about child raising. He appeared tired and on edge, a stark contrast to the composed image he usually projected. The lead detective informed Michael that they needed to talk about new developments in the case. Michael hesitated but allowed them inside. The detectives wasted no time confronting him with the evidence. The recovered text messages, Ruth's pregnancy, and the clear motive that had emerged. As they laid out the details, Michael's calm facade began to crumble. At first, he tried to deny everything, claiming that the messages were taken out of context and that he and Becky had simply argued, as many couples do. But when Detective Diaz mentioned Ruth's pregnancy, Michael's expression changed. The color drained from his face, and he became visibly agitated, pacing the room and avoiding my contact. Realizing that the police had him cornered, Michael finally broke down. He confessed to the affair and admitted that on the night of Becky's murder, he had lost control. When Becky confronted him about the affair after Ruth literally waved her positive pregnancy test in her infertile daughter's face, he panicked. In a fit of rage and desperation, he grabbed the rolling pin from the kitchen counter and beat her to death with it. He explained that he believed eliminating Becky would somehow solve his problems, allowing him to start a new life with Ruth and their unborn child. The detectives arrested Michael on the spot, reading him his rights as they placed him in handcuffs. Michael offered no resistance. His head hung low in resignation. As the police led him out of the house, neighbors gathered on their porches, shocked to see the man they knew being taken away for such a brutal crime. The extended Frederickson family, devastated by the news, struggled to comprehend how their once loving husband and son-in-law could commit such a heinous act. For them, the arrest marked the beginning of a long and painful journey toward justice. Michael Frederickson's trial began on December 30, 2019 at the Bexar County Courthouse in San Antonio. The case quickly drew attention from local news outlets like KSA 12 and the San Antonio Express News. Reporters lined up outside the courthouse, eager to cover every detail of the shocking murder case involving a respected financial advisor, his wife, and her mother. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney Lisa Perez-Bruto, a sharp, no-nonsense prosecutor known for her methodical approach in the courtroom. Perez-Bruto painted a chilling picture of Michael as a man driven to murder by the pressure of his affair with Ruth Breedlove and her unexpected pregnancy. She argued that Michael, unable to face the consequences of his actions, brutally killed Becky in a desperate attempt to escape his crumbling life. Perez's case was built around the text messages recovered from Michael's phone, Ruth's pregnancy, and Michael's own confession to the police. On the other side, the defense attorney, Mark Caldwell, tried to portray Michael as a man under extreme emotional distress. Caldwell, known for his ability to sway juries with his empathetic approach, argued that Michael never intended to kill Becky. Instead, Caldwell claimed that the crime was a tragic accident, the result of a heated argument that spiraled out of control. He urged the jury to consider Michael's previously clean record and the stress he was under at the time. Throughout the trial, Becky's family sat in the courtroom, their grief palpable. They listened intently as witnesses took the stand, recounting the events leading up to Becky's death. After a week of testimony, the jury deliberated for only 6 hours before reaching a verdict. On January 7, 2020, Michael Frederickson was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a decision that was met with relief from Becky's family, who felt that justice had been served. The verdict brought some closure to Becky's loved ones, but the emotional scars left by the crime would take much longer to heal. The case left the San Antonio community in shock, a stark reminder of how quickly a seemingly perfect life can unravel. In the aftermath of the trial, the lives of everyone involved in the case changed dramatically. Michael Frederickson began his life sentence at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice's William P. Hobby Unit, a stark contrast to the comfortable life he once knew. Behind bars, Michael had plenty of time to reflect on the choices that led him to this point. His reputation in San Antonio was ruined, and he became a symbol of betrayal and deceit. Ruth Breedlove, reeling from the revelations that had come to light during the trial, found herself ostracized by the community. The affair with Michael, once a secret passion, was now public knowledge. Ruth moved out of San Antonio, seeking to start over in the new city where no one knew her story. However, the emotional toll of the trial and the loss of her daughter weighed heavily on her. The pregnancy, once a source of excitement, became a painful reminder of the destruction she had helped cause. Ruth ultimately decided to give the child up for adoption, believing it was the best way to ensure a better future. As the months passed, the story of Becky Frederickson's murder became another tragic chapter in San Antonio's history. But for those who had known her, the loss was a wound that would never fully heal.